Chapter 2862, 2862A Draw. Chapter 2862, 2862A Draw. 2862A Draw. The raw stones chosen by Ling Han and Grandmaster Xinlai could be said to be very different. Ling Han's piece was the size of a man, while Grandmaster Xuanlai's one was only the size of a fist, not even 1% of Ling Han's piece. Hee, if the comparison is based on size, then Ling Han will sure win, someone joked. Shut up. He is a second-tier heavenly venerate, with battle prowess that is comparable to that of a fourth tier. How can you joke about him? Someone immediately scolded him lest he brought calamity upon himself. The man froze and didn't dare to speak anymore. Everyone was looking forward to this. What kind of sparks would be produced in the fierce contest between these two people? As layers of stone scraps fall off, whether there was anything contained in the raw stone, and what it might be, would soon be revealed to the public. Gasp! As a heavenly venerate, Ling Han was naturally faster. Under his hands, the raw stone was already showing a hint of primal chaos, and a seal could be vaguely seen as churning. Heavenly venerable seal, everyone exclaimed. How awesome! Obtaining a heavenly venerable seal at the very start, this already affirmed his invincible position. The fiery silk heavenly venerate's eyes also lit up as he secretly thought that it would seem that some good things had leaked into the raw stone lane despite having been browsed by a grandmaster of raw stone. Ling Han stopped his hand. He couldn't open it up any further, or the heavenly venerable seal would come into being. On the other side, there's also treasure here. It's also a heavenly venerable seal. The exclamation sounded again. Unexpectedly, Grandmaster Xinlai also unveiled a heavenly venerable seal. As expected of a grandmaster of raw stone, amazing. But there were heavenly venerable seals on both sides. How to judge this? Unless these two seals would be collected into one's mind, it would be impossible to compare which one was of a higher level. The problem was, this was a heavenly venerable seal, so even if it was given to someone, who would be willing to take it out again? Besides, if that person was to take out the more widely known 7 seals to deceive them, who would know? The first round, was it considered a draw? Grandmaster Xinlai smiled. Although the heavenly venerable seals cannot be analyzed, this old man here has a complete heavens ring, which can be used for scanning to match the heavenly venerable seal to the sequence so that comparison can be made. Everyone looked at each other. Was there such a thing? You can try it. Grandmaster Xinlai took out a ring, which was engraved with seals, but it was by no means heavenly venerable seals. Grandmaster Ling, please channel a heavenly venerable seal and press this on it, he said to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, randomly channeled a 9th grade seal while holding the ring, and one of the nodes suddenly lit up. Grandmaster Xinlai glanced at it. This is a 9th grade seal. He pointed out an area on the ring. Everything that lights up here is a 9th grade seal. Grandmaster Ling, you can try again. Ling Han once again channeled another 9th grade seal, and sure enough, it still lit up in the designated area. He was curious and said, what if it's a 7th grade seal? Here. Grandmaster Xinlai pointed to another area of the complete heavens ring. Ling Han channeled an 8th grade seal, and the complete heavens ring lit up again, and it was indeed not in the area of the 9th grade, nor in the area designated by Grandmaster Xinlai just earlier. This is an 8th grade seal, Grandmaster Xinlai said with a smile. Ling Han nodded. This can indeed reflect the level of the heavenly venerable seals. Everyone was surprised. There was actually research that produced such a thing now? This is a recent invention, so it's no wonder that everyone doesn't know about it, Grandmaster Xinlai said. He first introduced which area corresponded to the symbol of the 9th grade seal, and then pressed the raw stone in his hand on the complete heavens ring. Suddenly, the complete heavens ring lit up. A 7th grade seal, everyone said. Grandmaster Ling, you try it. Grandmaster Xinlai handed the complete heavens ring to Ling Han. Ling Han took it and pressed the raw stone on the complete heavens ring. The complete heavens ring also responded, and it lit up. It's also a 7th grade seal. Everyone was surprised. they didn't expect that this still failed to distinguish who would be the winner. In the first round, it is a draw, the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate said. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Xinlai nodded, approving such judgment. Grandmaster Xinlai, do you still have many of such complete Heaven's Ring? Someone asked Grandmaster Xinlai. Grandmaster Xinlai laughed loudly. Do you intend to use the complete Heaven's Ring to select the raw stones which contain heavenly venerable seals? That is impossible, as the raw stone must be cut to the extent that only a trace of stone scrap remains, and the heavenly venerable seal can be seen so that the complete Heaven's Ring can sense it and map it accordingly. Hearing what he had said, everyone shook their head. They could already see it, so how could they cheat? However, this wasn't without its benefits. In the past, even if you saw someone else unearth a heavenly venerable seal, you could only take a gamble when rushing to procure it. Whether you might have bought a high-level or a low-level seal at a costly price would only be based on luck. But now? After mapping, one would be able to know which grade it belonged to, and even the specific sequence would be clear, so one would also be able to know whether one already owned this heavenly venerable seal. Ling Han also became very interested. He had to go get one so that he would know which seals in the sequence he was missing and be able to connect the combination seals in a sequence. Grandmaster Ling, let's start the second round? Grandmaster Xinlai asked. All right, Ling Han nodded. It's still the same. You limit this old man to a specific area, but since it's a longer time limit this time, how about expanding it to 3 out of the 10 areas previously divided? Grandmaster Xinlai said with a smile. Ling Han agreed and randomly assigned 3 areas to Grandmaster Xinlai, while he also chose 3 areas. This time, 6 hours, the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate said, and he threw out another hourglass. The two immediately began to choose. The first confrontation had allowed them to understand that the other party was a stubborn opponent and was not easy to deal with. Everyone held their breath once again. Such an even match was indeed exciting, which made them look forward to it even more. Soon, 6 hours had passed. Stop, the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate said. He further added, please select your own stone respectively. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xinlai fetched a stone each, but this time the stones that they had selected were about the same size. Both of them chose to cut open the stone by themselves. As the stone scraps continued to peel off, the contents inside also reappeared. Great herb. Both sides have unearthed a great herb. Ling Han's is yellow-colored. Grandmaster Xuanlai's is also yellow-colored. Hiss, is this another tie? See whether one side has properties of healing. Below the orange grade, the value of great herb that heals injuries is higher. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect these two people would both unearth a yellow-colored great herb at the same time. After the great herbs had been fully extracted, they were handed over to the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate for evaluation. The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate observed carefully for a while and said, they are both great herbs to improve one's cultivation level. He paused and emphasized, invaluable. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xinlai took a closer look at the 2 great herbs, and they both nodded, agreeing with the conclusion of the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate that they were indeed great medicines for improving one's cultivation level. So, this second round came to a draw again. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that such a process would happen? What now? For the third round, this old man wants to enter the treasure area and then compete to see who is better, Grandmaster Xinlai suddenly said to the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2863, 2863 Broken Saber. Chapter 2863, 2863 Broken Saber. 2863 Broken Saber. The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate hesitated. There were many raw stones considered to be of high value in the treasure area, but scrap stones might also be discovered at the same time. As a result, they had not been retained internally, but placed here as a signboard to attract customers. If these two people were to take off with high-level heavenly venerable seals or an orange-grade great herb, then Saber Void Lane would sustain a great loss. He thought about it and decided to agree nonetheless. This was an excellent opportunity to improve the store's reputation, and since they could only choose one raw stone each, then the loss would still be limited even if the treasure was harvested by them. Treasure area? Everyone was excited. The treasure area of Saber Void Lane had always been a reserved area, and people were rarely allowed to enter it. It was just that an orange-grade great herb had been harvested a very long time ago, and additionally, a primitive beast had also been unearthed from here. It was extremely amazing. However, everyone wasn't allowed to enter the treasure area together. Only Ling Han, Grandmaster Xinlai, and the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate were allowed to enter, while the others could only watch from the outside. One day's time. The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate threw out the third hourglass. Neither Ling Han nor Grandmaster Xinlai wasted any time. They started immediately. As expected of Saber Void Lane, there were huge quantities of raw stones in this treasure area, arranged in a dazzling setup. Once one entered, one could feel a great aura, as if what was placed here wasn't stones, but rather time and age. Ling Han smiled. Although there was a huge quantity of raw stones here, there were only about 1,000 pieces. One day's time was enough for him to explore the area several times and choose the most valuable one among them. As he walked, he touched the stones one by one, but he was frowning slightly. In this majestic treasure area, there wasn't even a single heavenly venerable seal. Fuck. He stopped quickly and tapped lightly on a raw stone. There was a great herb in it, but it was only yellow grade. He shook his head and moved on. After walking around a third of the area, he stopped again and found another great herb. Moreover, it was of the orange grade. The orange grade was a leap from the yellow grade. The yellow-colored great herb could only improve one's cultivation level or heal injuries, but the orange grade great herb could help a heavenly venerate cast away the shackles of his cultivation level and advance towards a new height of power. To put it simply, it could help a heavenly venerate sense new fundamental powers. Therefore, the orange great herb was more precious than the heavenly venerable seal. Of course, for a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the orange great herb wouldn't have any meaning at all. Ling Han didn't take the stone. If he subsequently found out that this was the most precious raw stone in the entire area, Grandmaster Xinlai wouldn't be able to snatch it from him. Anyway, Ling Han had the battle prowess of 4th tier, which was not something which a 9th heaven celestial king could contend with. After walking for a while, Ling Han stopped for the 3rd time and had a look of surprise on his face. It was because he discovered a saber in this particular raw stone. This was a broken saber, and yet it still made Ling Han feel a terrible and fierce aura despite being isolated within thick layers that could cut off even the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Just a simple touch already caused him to have a headache. It was too scary. This was definitely a heavenly venerate tool, and had to have come from the hands of a high-level heavenly venerate to have such terrifying destructive power. Ling Han believed that the value of this broken saber should be higher than that of the orange-grade great herb. This saber could only be refined by at least a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, and it might even be a treasure of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, which was more amazing. He was sure that Saber Void Lane couldn't conclude the value of this raw stone, so it had been put here. Otherwise, they would definitely have opened it themselves. This saber had terrifying power. Ling Han still didn't take it and kept walking. This precious area was in the shape of a ring, so when Ling Han walked more than half of the place, he met Grandmaster Xinlai. Grandmaster Xinlai smiled politely at him and then passed him by. Ling Han also smiled slightly. He had a good impression of this old man. After walking for a while, Ling Han turned around and saw that Grandmaster Xinlai had already walked in front of the raw stone with the broken saber, and he kept looking at it with a puzzled look on his face, as if he didn't know whether to choose it or not. It seemed that the old man also felt something, but he didn't have the kind of see-through ability like Ling Han, so he seemed to be conflicted. Ling Han turned his head and continued to move forward. He found a few more great herbs one after another, and even discovered a heavenly venerable seal, which made him nod in approval. The reputation of the treasure area really didn't just come out of the air, and there were indeed precious treasures here. Huh. He was suddenly taken aback and stopped in his tracks. His hand was lying on a huge raw stone, and he could hardly believe his eyes. What he saw was completely beyond his expectation. This was too unbelievable, too amazing. Ling Han took a deep breath and walked past this raw stone. His heart was beating wildly. Should he choose this stone later? If he was to choose it, what he unveiled might be earth-shattering, but if he didn't choose it, was there any possibility for him to come here in the future? He also became conflicted and had the same feeling as Grandmaster Qianlai. There were really many good things here, and if he could only choose one, it wasn't enough. After going a full circle, Ling Han had already made up his mind. The time has come. The fiery silk Heavenly Venerate spoke up. In fact, both Ling Han and Grandmaster Qianlai had gone round once. To them, this treasure area was still a little small, and it wouldn't take a day's time to check out the whole place. Please. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Qianlai made their moves, and things turned out as Ling Han had expected. The raw stone that Grandmaster Qianlai chose was the one with the broken saber, while Ling Han chose the huge raw stone that had shocked him. Grandmaster Qianlai, you go first, Ling Han said. Grandmaster Qianlai did not decline, and immediately started to cut open the raw stone. After a while, boom, a murderous aura rushed towards his face. To say nothing of a ninth heaven celestial king, even the fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate turned pale and had an indescribable heart palpitation. Pa, the celestial tool in Grandmaster Qianlai's hand immediately fell to the ground, and his entire being also sat down on the ground, paralyzed, with cold sweat flowing down from him like a stream. Is there any peerless monster about to be born? I am a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, but why do I still have a feeling of fear? Everyone exclaimed. What exactly came out of this? Let me do it. The fiery silk Heavenly Venerate walked up. Obviously, Grandmaster Qianlai was no longer able to cut open the stone. Even if he was allowed to stay there, his body might be torn to pieces by the murderous aura. One ought to know that its contents had not been truly unearthed yet. Everyone gathered together and could only vaguely see something. This looks like a saber. Furthermore, it's a broken saber, and the breaking point is here. It is still covered by a layer of stone scrap, and the murderous aura is already so terrifying. Heavens, what is this? The fiery silk Heavenly Venerate's hands also trembled a little. So what if he was a fourth tier? The murderous aura of this broken saber was too strong indeed, and he couldn't control himself. But a fourth tier was a fourth tier, after all. He forcibly suppressed the palpitations in his heart and gave it a slap. Now that it was known that a saber was hidden in it, with a murderous aura so terrifying, its grade obviously had to be far above a celestial tool, so there was no need to worry about it being smashed by the power of a Heavenly Venerate. Pa, the stone shattered, and a broken saber immediately appeared in front of everyone. The whole body of this saber was pitch black, and it looked like 1/3 of it was broken. If one was to look carefully, this saber wasn't naturally black, but it had been stained with too much blood, which made it appear black. Pa. As soon as the broken saber came out, at least 90% of the people went weak and collapsed onto the ground. Even the Heavenly Venerates were no exception. Only the fourth tier was able to stand upright, but his legs were shaking. Chapter 2864, 2864 7th tier? Chapter 2864, 2864 7th tier. 2864 7th tier? This saber was very terrifying. To be able to advance to the position of a Heavenly Venerate was to be a prodigy among prodigies, standing at the pinnacle of the world. But a mere broken saber could actually render those Heavenly Venerates with cultivation level below the fourth tier unable to stand upright. Just what kind of concept was this? Incomparable. The fiery silk Heavenly Venerate sighed. According to my deductions, this should be the weapon of at least a 6th tier Heavenly Venerate, and having consumed the blood of countless Heavenly Venerates, it therefore possesses such a terrifying murderous aura. Everyone nodded. Once the saber was drawn, Heavenly Venerates below the cultivation level of 4th tier couldn't even stand steady. How would they be able to fight? The question was, who below the 4th tier would be able to use this saber? This wasn't a confrontation with the enemy yet, but he himself was already weak in the knees and fell to the ground. Wasn't this courting death? Unless this saber takes the initiative to recognize an owner, it won't work even if a 4th tier is to wield it, a 4th tier Heavenly Venerate said, but his eyes were still burning. If he could solve the shortcoming of hurting oneself, this broken saber could really be of great use. The eyes of Long Dao and the great cloud's Heavenly Venerate eyes also lit up. This saber was unearthed by Grandmaster Xinlai, so they could just ask the other party for it, and having a 4th tier open his mouth to request, even if it was a Grandmaster of Raw Stone, would he dare to refuse? Ling Han, do you want to continue the competition? The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate asked Ling Han. It seemed that there was no suspense anymore. A broken saber even suppressed the 4th tier Heavenly Venerate, which even a Heavenly Venerable Seal could not compare with by far. Ling Han smiled faintly. Of course. It wasn't that he didn't know the horror of this broken saber. In fact, Grandmaster Xinlai could at most guess that the thing hidden in this raw stone might be shocking, but he absolutely didn't know what it was. But Ling Han clearly knew it, but still didn't choose the raw stone. What did this mean? Ling Han began to cut into his stone carefully, as if there was a Heavenly Venerable Seal hidden in it. Every person present shook their head. This time, let alone a Heavenly Venerable Seal, even an orange-colored great herb would be useless as it couldn't be compared to this broken saber. But Ling Han was not only extremely slow, but he actually cut a huge raw stone into a human shape. Everyone couldn't help bearing weird expressions. Did he think that a person would really pop out of it if he was to cut it into a human shape? Ling Han's hands were trembling a little. Others didn't feel it at all, but he was under a lot of pressure. He didn't dare to make a wrong cut, otherwise he might suffer a violent backlash if he touched the thing inside, and he might even be killed from the shock wave. Therefore, he had to scan with his divine sense to clearly understand the situation inside. But when his divine sense encountered that thing, he was under tremendous pressure. Even though he possessed the battle prowess of a 4th tier, it was still quite unbearable for him. His hands became slower, and layers of sweat fell from his forehead. Some people lost their patience, thinking that Ling Han was deliberately delaying because he had definitely lost. Can it be opened or not? It's pointless to delay it like this. Why don't you just admit defeat? That's right. This time it's just a competition, and there's no disadvantage to you even if you lose. However, 4th tier elites such as the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate looked solemn. As the stone scraps became thinner and thinner, their strong divine sense could already feel an indescribable aura surging. This caused their hearts to tremble, even almost tearing them apart. What terrible thing was hidden inside? Shut up! The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate shouted sharply, and immediately everyone dared not speak anymore. Ling Han took a deep breath. Shwa, shwa, shwa. He made 17 consecutive slashes with his blade. Immediately, the thing in that raw stone was finally revealed. Hiss! Everyone was numb with shock as an indescribably turbulent wave surged. Within this raw stone, there really was a person. This was definitely not a living person, but a corpse, without the slightest breath of life. But it was precisely such a corpse that had caused Heavenly Venerates to become breathless, as if they had all become mortals facing an ultimate god. It was no wonder that Ling Han had to carefully cut it even with his strength. If it had been another person, it would have been impossible to unearth this corpse. At most they would reveal a hand, a foot, or something like that. Everyone retreated to the extreme, and then looked at it carefully. This was a man who looked to be in his 30s, with a square face filled with dominance, and he was indeed wearing a black dragon robe and a black flat crown on his head, giving him the appearance of an emperor. Could it be that this is the corpse of a 7th tier elite? Someone said in a trembling voice. It was too terrifying indeed. Even though it was just a corpse, the surrounding layers of space were shrinking and collapsing, as they couldn't bear its power at all. while the heaven and earth were getting even paler, and even though it was in the void, there were still dense thunder clouds and lightning rolling, and yet they didn't descend. Could it be that the heavens was also afraid? 7th tier elite. Even the heaven and earth would not dare to send down thunder as punishment. Impossible, someone suddenly exclaimed loudly. Although the voice was not high, it was filled with a mighty aura. Who are you? What do you know? Someone beside him couldn't help scolding the person. But more people actually revealed shocked expressions and bowed to this person. Even the 4th tier heavenly venerates were no exception. Young Master Xian, Lord Xian, Friend Xian. This was a magnificent young man with thick black hair and bright eyes, with a majestic aura that seemed to shake the world. Xin Qihu, the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Finally someone spoke his name. Hiss. Those who didn't yet know the identity of this person were gasping for air. Who in this world was known to everyone? That would definitely not be the few 7th tier heavenly venerates, but rather Xin Qihu, Lin Yulian, and Wu Haoyang, the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity. These 3 people were destined to become 6th tiers, and possibly even advance to the 7th tier. They were known as the greatest prodigies of all eternity, and without a doubt, they were well-deserving of such reputation. Xin Qihu strode over, and everyone couldn't help but retreat, clearing the way for him. Although he was a 4th tier, his battle prowess was at least at the 5th tier, and might be even a little bit stronger. Perhaps he alone could obliterate the entire culmination city. Greetings, Lord Xian. More people fell to the ground, bowing their heads to the greatest prodigy of all eternity. It was really unexpected that Xin Qihu would be attracted by this stone gambling contest. Xin Qihu strode forwards, and he had already come to the ancient corpse. Others dared not go within a distance of 30 meters, but he stood at a distance of 9 meters, exhibiting his terrifying strength. My father said that the 7th tier heavenly venerates hold the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world, transcending everything else, and are immortal. He stared at the ancient corpse as he said so. Xin Qihu's father, Xian Fu, was a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the strongest of all time under heaven and earth. That's right, my father said the same thing. A rumbling voice sounded, as if there were countless real dragons roaring, while a young man also strode over. Wu Haoyang, someone whispered. Hiss, here came another greatest prodigy of all eternity. If the other, Lin Yulian, was to come, then together with Ling Han, the current 4 great prodigies would have all gathered together. The 7th tier is immortal and cannot be eradicated. He can only be suppressed and not killed. Wu Haoyang walked over, only 9 meters away from the ancient corpse, and said, if it weren't for this, hysteria would have already attacked. A 7th tier couldn't die, but currently the heavenly venerate in black dragon robes was already dead, which could only mean that this person wasn't a 7th tier heavenly venerate. Weird. Xin Qihu suddenly frowned. Weird indeed. A beautiful voice sounded, and a stunning woman walked over elegantly, and similarly stood at the same place 9 meters away from the ancient corpse. Lin Yulian. Chapter 2865, 2865 Contend. Chapter 2865, 2865 Contend. 2865 Contend. Everyone was astounded. The 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity had actually appeared in Culmination City, and they had all moved for the sake of this ancient corpse appearing at the same time. It was proof enough to show just how astonishing this ancient corpse was. You can already see what's strange about this? Xian Qihu looked towards Lin Yulian. There was no one worthy of his notice. Aside from Lin Yulian, the only person that he would barely consider a rival was Wu Haoyang, and as for others, even 4th tiers were trash to him. Lin Yulian nodded. Theoretically, a 7th tier would not die or be destroyed, but the feeling this ancient corpse gives me is no different than how my father feels. That is indeed so. Wu Haoyang nodded as well. This man was definitely a 7th tier when he was alive, and even after death, he still has such tremendously terrifying pressure. I can guarantee that even if a sixth tier touches his body, their arm will be severed, at the very least. However, how could this be possible? Xin Qihu frowned. It was also he who had previously said that this definitely could not be the corpse of a seventh tier, because a seventh tier could not possibly die. This was a contradiction. However, no matter how they looked at it, this ancient corpse should indeed be a seventh tier. This was truly baffling. Moreover, Lin Yulian paused slightly, and then continued, there has never been news of a seventh tier heavenly venerate dying in all of history. If this was a seventh tier heavenly venerate, then what primitive era would he have to have existed in? This person's history may be countless times further and more extensive than we could possibly imagine, Wu Haoyang agreed. As these three people conversed, there was not one among the bystanders that had the right to interrupt. Even those fourth-tier heavenly venerates could only listen at the side. They were the three greatest prodigies of all eternity, and their battle prowess was at least at the fifth tier. This matter is too serious. We might have to ask the elders to come and take a look for themselves, Xin Qihu said. Lin Yulian nodded, and then turned to look towards Ling Han. Brother Ling, could you hand this ancient corpse over to us? Ling Han did not mind. Even he could not approach this ancient corpse. It would definitely blow up his body. He gave a gesture of invitation and said, please go ahead. Xin Qihu looked towards Ling Han and asked, so you are Ling Han? Ling Han merely smiled slightly. He did not know what Xin Qihu's attitude towards him was, so there was no rush to show anything, either. Not bad, not bad. I think that you should spend some more effort on stone gambling, Xin Qihu said. I heard that grandmasters of raw stone also have the ability of finding veins of ore, so would you like to come and give me a hand? He was saying this with a smile, and looked like he was joking, but if the other party wanted to take it seriously, then it seemed like he was being serious as well. Ling Han looked at Xin Qihu, also smiling, and asked, do you want to learn? I can take you as my disciple. He had been counterchecked. It seemed like Ling Han, too, was joking, but if Xin Qihu wanted to take him seriously, the former's words could also be taken seriously. They implied, you want to take me in as your lackey? Heh, I will directly become your master and be your senior. Xin Qihu faltered slightly. He had not expected that Ling Han would really dare to say this, daring to fire a retort back at him, the greatest prodigy of all eternity. But if he really wanted to flip out, there did not seem like there was anyone that could be his target. It was he who had first spoken half-jokingly. How could it be that Ling Han could not respond with a joke himself then? I will remember you. Xin Qihu smiled, his eyes bright, exuding a frightening pressure. Ling Han was not the type that was willing to be bullied. He was just about to retort, but Lin Yulian stretched out a hand in front of him, stopping the words he was just about to say. This exquisite beauty said, Brother Xin, Brother Wu, we should quickly get going and pay a visit to the realm battlefield. All right. Xin Qihu nodded. He knew that Lin Yulian was deliberately trying to play mediator here. He could refuse to give face to others, but when it came to Lin Yulian, he definitely had to give her some face. Wu Haoyang glanced longer at Ling Han and said, Ling Han, your progress is too slow. How can you be worthy of fighting me like this? I have only lost to you alone in a battle of equal cultivation level. I definitely do not permit myself to eternally bear this kind of humiliation. He was no despicable character and was very broad-minded, relating this part of his history in full public. What? Wu Haoyang has lost to Ling Han in the past? This is too inconceivable. He is the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, Wu Haoyang actually lost. However, Wu Haoyang is presently in the fourth tier, but Ling Han is only in the second tier. This is enough to show the difference. That's true. A moment of strength does not mean eternal strength. He is already no longer worthy of being considered Wu Haoyang's equal. Wu Haoyang is truly broad-minded, not caring in the slightest to speak of how he has previously lost in public. He has truly lived up to his name of being the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Everyone was conversing spiritedly, all of them praising Wu Haoyang. Ling Han was unconcerned and said calmly, "You can suppress your cultivation level, and we can have another battle of equal cultivation level. Maybe some other day," Wu Haoyang said smilingly. He pointed at that ancient corpse. "I don't have the time now." Ling Han nodded and replied, "All right." In a battle of equal cultivation level, whom would he have to fear? He could thrash even a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. Even if Lin Yulian and the others had extremely astonishing strength, they still had to carefully take out a layer of stones, which they heaped on this ancient corpse. After piling layer upon layer, that terrifying pressure gradually lessened at last. But the layers of stone could not compare with actual raw stone. Hence, in the end, the three of them heaved the ancient corpse, which was looking like a small hill, and left. Even so, there was still astonishing pressure seeping out of the corpse shroud, causing everyone they passed to involuntarily sprawl out on the ground. Not until Lin Yulian and the others finally vanished from sight did everyone finally sigh in relief. This corpse was really too terrifying. "Grandmaster Ling, this old man admits defeat." Grandmaster Xinlai smiled. With a toss, he threw out two things, and they were both wrapped in a layer of stone. Ling Han knew that this was the heavenly venerable seal and great herb that he had previously unearthed. He was slightly surprised. Previously, they had made no agreement that the winner would take all. Grandmaster Xinlai was deliberately showing him a gesture of goodwill. Upon further thought, Grandmaster Xinlai was actually just a celestial king. So what use would he have for this great herb or heavenly venerable seal? In any case, he would have to give them over to some heavenly venerate. So why couldn't he just pass them on to Ling Han? It should be known that Ling Han had boundless potential, and his future accomplishments were immeasurable. Ling Han nodded at Grandmaster Xinlai and smiled, indicating that he accepted his kindness. "Please also deal with this broken saber on my behalf, Grandmaster Ling." Grandmaster Xinlai stayed benevolent until the end, and gifted that broken saber to Ling Han as well. In any case, he couldn't even draw near to it. "Grandmaster Xinlai, this is a supreme treasure. Don't you think that is too rash?" The great cloud's heavenly venerate immediately said. "That's right, this is a rare supreme treasure, so it would be better to deal with it after much serious consideration first," Lung Dao said as well. Grandmaster Xinlai was incredibly slick and smooth. How could he possibly make enemies of any heavenly venerate? He hurriedly smiled and said, "My lords, your words have come a little too late. This old man has already gifted the broken saber to Grandmaster Ling. If you desire it, please seek Grandmaster Ling. It is no longer any business of this old man." "Feng Yu, Buchuan, we should leave." The old geezer really left, without even turning back, as if there were flames licking at his heels. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This old geezer was actually quite interesting. "Ling Han, this broken saber was unearthed at our lane. Give me some face, and we will buy it from you, all right?" The fiery silk heavenly venerate said to Ling Han. It was extremely possible that this broken saber was the precious tool of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and this had boundless significance. Chapter 2866, 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. Chapter 2866, 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. Ling Han, it would be better to pass it to me. The great cloud's heavenly venerate spoke up as well. In return, I will allow you to choose any 10 raw stones in our raw stone lane as compensation. Hearing these words, everyone couldn't help but scoff secretly. So stingy. Could the value of 10 raw stones compare to the value of this broken saber? He was completely just planning to gain something without risking anything of his own. Ling Han rolled his eyes at him. He had already made a clean sweep of that raw stone lane long ago. To say nothing of 10 pieces, even 100 or 1,000 raw stones would not be able to reveal anything valuable. You can just keep on dreaming. Ling Han, you should consider carefully, Lung Dao also advised, his words filled with threat. Ling Han glanced at him. I hate you too. If either of you speak any further, I will definitely kill him. Would you believe me? The great clouds heavenly venerate and Long Dao instinctively wanted to say no, but when they spotted the killing intent that was hidden under Ling Han's calm features, they swallowed the words that were just at the tip of their tongue. They both humphed. What meaning was there for dignified heavenly venerates to just argue verbally? When Ling Han exited the city, they could just kill and rob him. The reason why the great clouds heavenly venerate had previously not moved was because he felt that he alone was not enough of a guarantee to kill Ling Han, so he wanted to wait for Long Dao to arrive. Ling Han glanced at the fiery silk heavenly venerate again. The latter had been quite polite, so he smiled slightly. Apologies, I myself am also quite interested in this saber. The fiery silk heavenly venerate's gaze flickered. Since he was able to become the shopkeeper of Saber Void Lane and oversee this place, his strength definitely surpassed the average of 4th tier. However, should he move now and suppress Ling Han? He was wary. Firstly, this was in full public, and if he made a move to snatch the item forcefully, the matter of Saber Void Lane bullying their customers would spread out. In the future, who would still come to choose raw stones here? Wouldn't they be afraid that if they unearthed anything valuable, it would be forcefully snatched from them as well? By then, with several dozen 6th-tier heavenly venerates simultaneously interrogating him, how was he supposed to explain? Secondly, Ling Han was not an ordinary 2nd tier. His battle prowess was comparable to a 4th tier's. If they fought, it would definitely cause tremendous damage to Culmination City, and the fiery silk would not be able to bear the consequences for such actions, either. Hence, after further consideration, he nodded slowly. In that case, Friend Ling has to be careful. These words seemed both like a threat and a reminder because it was not just he alone who had designs on that broken saber. Furthermore, there were at least 2 heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession as well, and he had even more great herbs. Who did not want to obtain them? Ling Han merely smiled, then turned and left. Wait. A voice suddenly rang out, appearing very abrupt. Everyone looked over and couldn't help but feel surprised, because the speaker was actually a celestial king. A mere celestial king actually dared to speak up in these circumstances? Had his head been kicked silly by a donkey? Yet this celestial king's expression was filled with arrogance as he declared, "My young master has said that he wants this broken saber. No one is to touch it. Otherwise, when my young master returns, whoever has taken this saber, my young master will seek them out and demand it from them." Hiss, what bold words. Who is your young master then? Even those aggressive people like Yu Chengwang felt an uncontrollable urge to beat someone up. Fuck, the celestial king was actually even more arrogant than him? Was he trying to steal his limelight here? My young master, that celestial king said slowly, extremely calm and steady, is Xin Qihu, Lord Xin. When these words fell, a dead silence fell over the area. Who was Xin Qihu? He was the greatest prodigy of all eternity, and though he had been stuck in the 4th tier for many years already, it was certain that his battle prowess had to be at the 5th tier, at least. Furthermore, his old man was a 7th tier heavenly venerate, an indestructible, immortal, terrifying existence. Even if his old man was set aside, and it was him alone, how many people in this world could afford to offend him? Thus, when Xin Qihu's name was heard, everyone fell silent, and even Yu Chengwang gave up his intentions to compete. It could not be helped. He really could not compete. That celestial king's expression was filled with pride. His master had that kind of intimidation. He had already witnessed this kind of scene a considerable number of times, and who would dare to disobey his command? Ling Han moved and piled those layers of stone on the broken saber. Otherwise, even he would have to suffer some effects, and this could not be used to intimidate an opponent at all, because once the saber was exposed, and he was the nearest, the effects on him naturally would be the most severe. Very good. You are very proactive. When the Celestial King saw how Ling Han had taken the initiative to wrap the broken saber, he couldn't help but nod, a smile appearing on his face. The action of commanding a heavenly venerate made him feel an indescribable feeling of superiority. He did not need to become a heavenly venerate himself, but could still command a heavenly venerate. This was too fun. Very soon, Ling Han had concealed the broken saber completely, wrapping a thick layer of stone around it. Then, he picked it up. He attempted to stow it away into his spatial tool, but before he had managed to stow it in, it had already destroyed the spatial tool. He shook his head. From the look of things, the only thing he could do was hold it. "Bring it over here quickly," the Celestial King harshly shouted when he saw how Ling Han was moving slowly. Ling Han glanced at him and strode over. When everyone saw this, they all shook their head. Sigh, even someone as strong as Ling Han had to bow his head in submission. Xin Qihu was too powerful. With this kind of authority, TSK, even just his subordinate could be so domineering and overbearing. Seeing Ling Han approach, that Celestial King couldn't help but reveal a proud grin. Heavenly Venerate? Tui. Ling Han had already drawn near, and that Celestial King very naturally extended his hand, wanting to take the broken saber from him. Pa. Ling Han moved and delivered a slap right at him. That Celestial King's eyes immediately bulged. He had never imagined that Ling Han would, and actually dared to, make a move on him, but how could he possibly be capable of sustaining the blow of a Heavenly Venerate? He did not even manage to counter, and he had already been blown up, turning into a fountain of blood. Ling Han very carelessly flicked his hand, as if he was swiping off some dirt that was on his hand. Quite a number of people were gaping, appearing extremely shocked. That was Xin Qihu's servant. Though his individual strength was not even worth mentioning, killing him was in fact equivalent to slapping Xin Qihu. This would become a huge problem. But there were also a number of people who were pleased. A mere Celestial King actually dared to order around a Heavenly Venerate. This was a reasonable kill. Ling Han turned and left. Since he had killed the Celestial King, that was it. Was there any need to take it to heart? As for Xin Qihu, sooner or later, he would battle the latter. Everyone saw him off. Some looked impressed and admiring, while some sneered, delighting in his misfortune. There were some that had soaring killing intent and were waiting for a chance to make a move. Ling Han, Ling Shi, and Fu Tianqing went to find Hun Yo and the Empress, and they decided to return to base after reuniting with them. They had already stayed here for more than 900 years, and had already unearthed more or less all the valuable raw stones here. Furthermore, after this competition, Ling Han was probably going to become the least welcomed customer of every raw stone lane here. It was already impossible for him to want to get rich secretly. Hence, there was not much meaning left in continuing to stay here. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted Zhou Hong and the others to help him take a look at this broken saber to see if they could think of some way to make it so that it would not have any effect on the user. If that was possible, the significance of the saber would be much greater. They set out, exiting Culmination City, and turned back around to head to base. But clearly, it would not be so easy for them to leave. Not long after exiting the city, they spotted a man that was sitting in the distance. There weren't any plants here, so there was nothing keeping the soil rooted. Dirt and sand fluttered in the air, seemingly like a desert. In this kind of place, there was a chair. Aside from deliberately posturing, what other significance would there be? This show-off was Yu Chengwang. "Ling Han, do you think you can leave so easily without my permission?" he said in a disdainful tone. Chapter 2867, 2867 Weakest Link. Chapter 2867, 2867 Weakest Link. 2867 Weakest Link. Ling Han glanced at him. "Where are your lackeys? Let them come out." "Ling Han!" someone shouted immediately, and walked out from the surging yellow sand. It was the Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate. He was just a member of the Yu clan's alliance, an alliance and not anyone's subordinate. He was a dignified Heavenly Venerate, and a fourth-tier cultivator at that. How could he possibly be under someone else's command? The reason why he would take action under Yu Chengwang's instigation was naturally the treasures in Ling Han's possession. That broken saber, the peerless great herbs, and the heavenly venerable seals were all too attractive. Out of the mouth comes misfortune. This is an old saying, and it contains the truth, but there are people who haven't suffered enough. The four sides heavenly venerate also came out of the yellow sand, and his face was now filled with bitterness and sorrow. There is nothing left to be said. Kill him. The highest north heavenly venerate also appeared, and stood behind Ling Han to prevent him from escaping. When he went to see Ling Han that day, his face was full of amiability, which made people feel that he was very easy to get along with, but now his face was filled with killing intent, which made people shudder. The six heavens heavenly venerate and gray space heavenly venerate also appeared on the left and right, respectively, similarly full of killing intent. In this instant, 5 fourth-tier heavenly venerates had actually joined forces to surround and attack Ling Han. Ling Han remained unfazed, turned his head, and said, "All of you, go into hiding first. I'll get rid of the trash first." The Empress and the others nodded, and entered the celestial guest residence one after another. "Such an arrogant tone," said the four sides heavenly venerate, his face filled with anger, and it was obvious that he had switched expressions. "No matter how freakish you are, you're merely a second tier," the highest north heavenly venerate said disdainfully. "My lords, please act together to suppress this brat," Yu Chengwang urged. Although he was the son of a sixth tier, he had to maintain absolute respect when facing fourth tiers. At the level of heavenly venerable tier, the hierarchy of the levels became even stricter. "All right, we can avoid future troubles." The gray space heavenly venerate nodded and took the initiative to attack. As he made the move, the other heavenly venerates moved as well. The 5 great elites launched attacks together towards Ling Han to suppress him. Boom! The attacks of the fourth tiers were too terrifying. The space here was already unstable, and the earth immediately crumbled, creating an extremely frightening scene, as if the entire dimension was about to collapse. If these attacks took place in the Flaming Frost realm, it would be absolutely impossible to cause such an effect, as the power of the heaven and earth would balance and suppress it in order to maintain the stability of the dimension. However, this dimension was already dead. Rather than calling it a dimension, it would be more accurate to describe it as a huge piece of barren land that couldn't breed any vitality, because this dimension itself was dead and absolutely devoid of vitality to begin with. The destructive power of a heavenly venerate could be infinitely magnified here, and the horror of it was indescribable. Ling Han humphed coldly. "You're seeking death." His body moved and appeared in front of the highest north heavenly venerate, throwing out a punch. "You're overestimating your abilities." The highest north heavenly venerate sneered, maintaining his original attack. Pung! The highest north heavenly venerate was immediately sent flying. He was actually no match for Ling Han at all. Ling Han charged forward through this gap and chased after the highest north heavenly venerate, barraging him violently. Pung, pung, pung. His punches became faster and faster. The infinite power of dimension burst forth from within his body, and densely packed seals flickered on his skull, interweaving together into one piece. As he struck with the fists of fury, he unleashed his full battle prowess. This time, Ling Han was channeling the 9th grade combination seals, which boosted his power by 44 times, causing his battle prowess to be extremely terrifying. Not good. The highest north heavenly venerate couldn't help being shocked. Although Ling Han was only channeling 9th grade seals, which he himself had mastered a few of, the boost in power the latter enjoyed was only 4 or 5 times, but the effect was completely different when it was channeled in Ling Han's hands. "Combination seals," the highest north exclaimed. Dozens of 9th grade seals were superimposed together, and their effect would reach the level of 5th grade, surpassing any high-level seals that he had mastered. The highest north heavenly venerate tried his best to block the attacks, but he was no match for Ling Han's power at all. He was being knocked back again and again. The highest north retreated, but Ling Han chased him down and kept attacking, while the gray space heavenly venerate and the other great elites were several positions behind, and were actually unable to catch up no matter what. This was too appalling. It was clearly the 5 great elites that had besieged Ling Han alone, but now the situation was forcibly turned into a one-on-one battle. And the result of a one-on-one battle was that the highest North Heavenly Venerate was outmatched. The Gray Space Heavenly Venerate and the other three were both anxious and shocked. If Ling Han was to finish off the highest North Heavenly Venerate first, that would be equivalent to breaking one of their links, and it also meant that Ling Han could still crush them one by one. Therefore, they had to stop Ling Han. Otherwise, it would deal a devastating blow to their confidence. The highest North Heavenly Venerate naturally knew this too, and he was being drawn into the eye of the storm, which left him no room for retreat, so he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Pong, pong, pong. However, Ling Han's explosive power was too terrifying. Ling Han's strength wasn't inferior to the highest North's to begin with, and now with a strength boost of 44 times. In addition to the power of the Heavenly Venerate technique that he had cultivated, the power of his strikes really caused his opponent to complain unceasingly. How could a mere second tier be strong to this extent? Blood flowed from the corner of the highest North's mouth, but he forcibly suppressed it and didn't spit it out directly from his throat. Further, his complexion was even more hilarious. It was red at one instance, and then white in the next instance, being even more changeable than that of the Four Sides Heavenly Venerate. Crack, crack, crack. The violent sound of bones breaking could be heard continuously. Despite the highest North Heavenly Venerate's body being tempered by the fundamental power, under such a fierce attack, there was still breakage. He hastily took out a cyan great herb and just bit off a leaf and consumed it without even looking at it. In the midst of a fierce battle, there was no time for the highest North Heavenly Venerate to recover slowly, and he could only consume a precious leaf of a great herb. The effect was obvious. His Heavenly Venerate bones were healing and even showing signs of becoming stronger within a short period of time. This was just the healing of a cyan great herb. If it had been green or yellow, it would definitely have been even more impressive and awesome. How dare you eat my precious medicine? Spit it out. Ling Han was furious, and he struck with fists of fury even more rapidly. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was taken aback for a moment. What has my consumption of my own great herb anything to do with you? However, he suddenly realized that Ling Han already regarded him as a dead person, so everything on him naturally became Ling Han's. Thinking that way, wasn't he just consuming Ling Han's great herb? Damn, Ling Han was too hateful. The highest North Heavenly Venerate screamed. Ever since he had become a Heavenly Venerate, he had never lost his composure like this, but now he was being infuriated to the extreme by Ling Han. And yet, he could only keep retreating despite being furious. Oh, how much he wanted to reunite with the Gray Space Heavenly Venerate and the others so they could combine the power of 5 people to suppress Ling Han. However, Ling Han didn't give the highest North this chance at all, simply targeting him and fiercely beating him up, so much so that he could only be continuously sent flying. While the Gray Space Heavenly Venerate and the others were not far away, the distance remained fixed, and they were unable to get any closer. The highest North Heavenly Venerate also became ruthless. If worst came to worst, he would just consume all of this great herb, and he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to survive Ling Han's burst of power. The Heavenly Venerable Seals could only release energy for a maximum of 2 hours, regardless of whether it was a single seal or combination seals. At that time, to say nothing of the joint forces of the Gray Space Heavenly Venerate and the others, even the highest North Heavenly Venerate himself wouldn't need to be afraid of Ling Han. It was just that Ling Han's punches were too overbearing. After a while, the highest North Heavenly Venerate had to bite off another leaf and consume it. The bones in his arm had already been severely broken, so he had no choice but to take the medicine. Ling Han burst into anger, while his fists struck with greater and greater speed. The highest North Heavenly Venerate could only keep on taking medicine as he had to survive this most dangerous period. Chapter 2868, 2868 Killing Them All. Chapter 2868, 2868 Killing Them All. 2868 Killing Them All. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was running out of great herbs. There were only 7 leaves on this great herb, and he had finished every one of them. He had to resort to eating the stem now. Even though the effectiveness was not any weaker compared to the leaves, he could only get 7 to 8 bites of it. A sense of doubt rose in the highest north heavenly venerate's mind. Could he endure until the end of Ling Han's power burst? He definitely could. He pushed the negative emotions to the back of his mind as quickly as they came up. How could one who could become a heavenly venerate not have this much toughness? With the exception of a never-before-seen prodigy like Xin Qihu, everyone had to encounter tons of setbacks and pitfalls on their path to becoming a heavenly venerate. If he hadn't had at least this much tenacity, he would have long perished on his journey to becoming a heavenly venerate. He tried his best to hold on, relentlessly swallowing the great herb while calculating the time. 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. He revealed an expression of joy. He could still barely use the great herb in his hand one more time, while Ling Han's burst of power had ended. "Ha, brat, it's your turn to suffer." The purple flame's heavenly venerate also displayed a cold smile filled with killing intent. Ling Han was already at his limit. This time, it was their turn to beat the SHT out of this brat. Ling Han did not falter. Boom! An even more shocking power erupted from his body, raising his battle prowess by yet another level. What? Another combination seal? The highest north heavenly venerate was shocked. Ling Han's skull, pelvis, arms, and legs were shining with the light of a seal. This was definitely another combination seal. This time, the highest north had the urge to vomit blood literally. A sense of despair crept up inside him. Heavenly venerable seals were rare beyond compare. Barring the 7 more widely known seals, trying to obtain even one of them was incredibly difficult. And if even getting one of them was this hard, what more of obtaining such a combination seal? However, not only did Ling Han have combination seals, he also had more than one set. Knowing this, how could the highest north heavenly venerable not want to vomit blood? How could he not despair? How could he possibly hold on? The highest north heavenly venerate was a tough man, but the great herb in his hands was completely spent. It was impossible to make bricks without straws. How was he supposed to endure any longer? He took his final portion of the great herb and then roared as he launched a desperate attack. As a 4th-tier heavenly venerate, he was not short of decisiveness. Since there was no path to retreat, he had to kill his way out. He aggressively pressed forward, turning defense into offense. Only by pushing Ling Han back, or at the very least making him ease up on his attacks, would he have the chance to regroup with the gray space heavenly venerate and the rest. For the sake of survival, he gave it his all. Ling Han had a calm look on his face. Why would he give the tiger a chance to return to the mountains? Kill! He continued with his fierce onslaught. Using the astonishing power of the 4 direction seals, he sent the highest north heavenly venerate flying into the distance with a single punch, not showing any signs of stopping at all. Pong! 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 The highest north heavenly venerate was truly in despair. He could feel the organs inside his body seething. They were close to bursting. How strong was the body of a heavenly venerate? It was tempered with the fundamental powers of the Genesis world, and was many times stronger than divine metal. Each ascension brought it closer in strength to the level of a heavenly venerate tool. But now, he was being beaten into submission by Ling Han. He was frustrated, enraged, and indignant. However, there was nothing he could do to turn this unfavorable, losing situation around. His chances of survival were slim. A cold glint flashed in Ling Han's eyes. Pong! He struck out with his fist, straight into the highest north heavenly venerate's temple, directly blowing this heavenly venerate's mind to bits. So what if he was a heavenly venerate? Unless he managed to release his spirit ahead of time, a complete destruction of his mind would result in absolute death. The highest north heavenly venerate had died. At that moment, the purple flame's heavenly venerate and the rest stopped in their tracks. The highest north heavenly venerate was famous as them, and their strength was more or less the same. They had fought, both on the same side and on opposing ends, for many epochs. But now, the highest North Heavenly Venerate had been killed right before their eyes. They didn't even have the chance to save him. This gave them chills down their spine, and they felt a sense of nervousness from the depths of their soul. Would they also meet a similar end? However, no Heavenly Venerate was that fragile. The four of them immediately rekindled their fighting spirit and charged at Ling Han. Ling Han did not shy away from the challenge and met the four of them head-on. Is this brat courting death? The Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate and the rest didn't understand, but they did not care, either. All they wanted was Ling Han's death. Kill, kill, kill. Just as their attacks were about to land, Ling Han revealed a mysterious smile. With a wave of his right hand, he threw out the thing hanging on his back. As the stone sheath unwrapped itself, a broken saber was revealed. Wong. Immediately, a terrifying, murderous aura surged forth. What? Not good. The Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate and the rest were shocked. As they were assaulted by this wave of murderous aura, their battle prowess instantly fell. They had to focus a lot of their effort to resist it. Otherwise, they might not even be able to stand firm. Ling Han chuckled and then launched his attack. Naturally, he was already mentally prepared before he threw out this broken saber. Furthermore, his body harbored millions and millions of powers of dimension, making him incredibly resistant to oppressive auras. He had discovered this fact back when he opened the stone, but he had intentionally put on a ruse to hide his true abilities. He hadn't been thinking too hard about it back then. He simply hadn't wanted to reveal his strength. Little had he known, it had resulted in him successfully trapping the four great Heavenly Venerates. Pong! He crushed the six heavens Heavenly Venerate's skull with a single punch. Then, as he turned around, he smashed the Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate's skull in with his knee, utterly destroying the latter's mind in the process. He wasn't done yet. He retracted his hand and leg, and then struck out again with both simultaneously. Pong! Pong! Both the four sides Heavenly Venerates and Gray Space Heavenly Venerate's skull were smashed. Ling Han wasn't intentionally trying to make things so bloody, but he didn't have a choice. A Heavenly Venerate could only be killed by destroying their mind. Shwa! He wrapped the broken saber back in the layers of stone. Even though he had a strong resistance to the murderous aura emitted by this broken saber, he still felt some of its effects. It was just that he could withstand it better than a normal fourth tier. His movements were very practiced, throwing out the saber, killing, and then cleaning up, all in a single breath. As Ling Han finished, Yu Chengwang was in such shock that he stood up from his chair, his face twitching uncontrollably. Heavenly Venerates were individuals that wouldn't even balk at the destruction of an entire realm. However, the scene before him was simply too shocking. 5 fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates practically perished in an instant. How could he possibly accept such a thing? How could he possibly remain calm? Ling Han looked at Yu Chengwang silently. Yu Chengwang couldn't stop himself from gulping, as he felt sweat dripping from his forehead. He could sense the pressure of death coming down on him, but under Ling Han's stoic gaze, he didn't dare move a single muscle. Otherwise, he would surely fall on the receiving end of Ling Han's swift attacks and end up the same way as those 5 Heavenly Venerates. Ling Han, my father is a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate. It's not too late for you to cease and desist, he warned Ling Han. He felt great shame to the point of wanting to kill himself as the words left his mouth. He was still a 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate, an all-powerful existence in any medium-level dimension. Even in the Flaming Frost realm, he would stand amongst the strongest of elites. But now, he was forced to use his father's name to try and scare someone else just so that he would have a chance to survive. Shameful. It was much too shameful. Ling Han walked towards Yu Chengwang and casually said, "Sure, I don't mind sparing your pitiful life." Yu Chengwang felt a sense of relief, despite being utterly displeased with how Ling Han had called him pitiful. However, before he even had a chance to fully process it all, he saw Ling Han's iron fist coming straight for him. Pong! His head was instantly crushed. Chapter 2869, 2869, Empty Fort Strategy. Chapter 2869, 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. Why? Yu Chengwang's remnant soul, which hadn't yet dissipated completely, let out an unwilling voice. Didn't Ling Han promise not to kill him? Just kidding, don't take it seriously, Ling Han said lightly. Yu Chengwang's remnant soul let out a shrill cry. Despite being reluctant, it could only return to heaven and earth. If he wasn't dead already, he would still be infuriated to death by Ling Han. Ling Han stood upright in midair and glanced around. Here, the sky was filled with yellow sand, and the heaven and earth were so unique that even the eyesight of the heavenly Venerate couldn't reach very far. After scanning around, he said, "Listen, demons and monsters, I will stay here for 10 days. If anyone wants to make a move, I will definitely oblige you for a battle." After speaking, he just sat down cross-legged. This was so domineering. In the distance, the figures of heavenly venerates loomed. Yu Chengwang and the others were interested in the treasures belonging to Ling Han, so how could other people's hearts actually be at peace? Naturally, that was impossible. Yu Chengwang and the others had merely moved first, while the others were simply waiting and observing. It was inevitable that a huge battle would be set off. However, no one thought that the battle between Ling Han and Yu Chengwang would end so quickly. Moreover, it was a complete victory for Ling Han, with him absolutely crushing the other party without sustaining any injury at all. Facing such a terrifying opponent, who would dare to step out and be targeted? However, only Ling Han knew that he had no other option. It was due to the fact that he possessed a special ability. After killing a heavenly venerate, he would absorb the life essence of the other party. Remember, he had killed 6 heavenly venerates in one go just now, with 5 of them having already advanced to the 4th tier. Thus, their life essences gushed into his body all at once, making him feel like he was about to explode. The infinite powers of dimension were like a millstone, crushing these life essences and turning them into energy that Ling Han could absorb, improving his cultivation level at a terrifying speed. Yet on the other hand, this power was too terrifying, and the rush of power caused him indescribable pain. One had to know that despite him having insta-killed these opponents, there was actually a trick to it. In terms of real battle prowess, the highest North Heavenly Venerate and Purple Flames Heavenly Venerate were not much inferior to Ling Han, and it was merely that the Heavenly Venerable Seals that Ling Han had mastered were much more impressive. Additionally, with the assistance of the Broken Saber, all that allowed him to create a miracle. However, these heavenly venerates exploded, and the life essences gushed into his body. He was actually being filled to the brim, to the point of nearly exploding. The pain was so difficult to bear that he had to use all his power to suppress it. Ling Han forcibly suppressed that feeling of pain. Should he show even the slightest hint of being in pain, perhaps some daring person would make a move against him, and then would immediately be able to confirm his real condition. Although Ling Han would still have the help of the Empress and Hun Yo, the strength of the 2 women was only at the 3rd tier, and fighting against a 4th tier would surely be a disastrous situation for them. Therefore, Ling Han had no choice but to take a risk, and sat down domineeringly just like that. On the contrary, it made people unable to ascertain his depth and real condition. Inside his body, his cultivation level was skyrocketing. As expected of a 4th tier, the power was extremely powerful indeed, so much that the energy being transformed was overwhelmingly abundant. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time passed continuously, and soon the 10 days' time was up. Ling Han didn't stand up. He realized that he had still underestimated the energy of the 6 heavenly venerates, especially the 5 4th tier heavenly venerates. He wasn't able to fully absorb the energy in 10 days, so he still couldn't stand up. He continued to sit and refine the energy, but this made other heavenly venerates develop other ideas. The 10-day period is up. Why hasn't he left yet? Did he think that wasn't enough display of his might, and still intend to continue intimidating us? What an arrogant guy. But is there a possibility that something is wrong with him? It isn't an impossibility. It would be absolutely impossible to kill 5 elites of comparable strength in one go without paying a little price. Hiss, then this guy was deliberately being intimidating before, but he was actually in the process of healing. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. If this had been true, then they might have missed a great opportunity. Perhaps, right now he still hasn't recovered yet. Hee, why don't you go up and test it out? Many people were speculating that Ling Han still might not have recovered his battle prowess, but who would dare to give it a try? Hadn't they seen the fate of the Purple Flames, Heavenly Venerate, and the others? If, by any chance, Ling Han was deliberately setting a trap and trying to lure out those who wanted to kill him, then wouldn't that be walking right into his trap? Thus, many people were getting restless, but stayed still. The more people there were, the more their hearts wouldn't be united. Perhaps if there was only one person, he would grit his teeth and get on with it. Yet right now, you were looking at me, and I was looking at you. No one wanted to pave the way for others, so the opportunity was wasted just like that. Just like this, another 7 days passed by in a flash. Ling Han's body moved, and he stood up. He had finally refined all the life essences of the Heavenly Venerates. Not only had he regained his battle prowess, but his battle prowess had also further increased by another notch due to the fact that his cultivation level had advanced to the late stage of the 2nd tier. All of you, Ling Han swept a gaze around and shook his head, have missed a great opportunity. I did lose my battle prowess previously, and should anyone have made a move, I'd have been unable to stop it. Well, for the sake of you being so obedient, I will spare you this once. He laughed and walked away. This was too arrogant. Everyone was furious. It turned out that they had really fallen into Ling Han's empty fort strategy. But since he had succeeded, then fine. Why did he still need to say it out loud and mock others? Damn, it was too detestable of him. Yet they hadn't dared to make a move before, let alone now. Who else with cultivation level below 5th tier could take down Ling Han? Unless it was the strongest prodigies such as Lin Yulian and Xin Qihu. Xin Qihu will definitely not spare Ling Han. That's right. He killed Xin Qihu's servant. Although he was merely a celestial king, who is Xin Qihu? He's someone who would never accept such humiliation. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Everyone comforted themselves in this way. Ling Han was doomed to die anyway, so why should they take action? Ling Han returned to the base. Upon returning, he handed the broken saber to Zhou Hong, while Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao both went to find new veins of ore. Zhou Hong immediately said that this was definitely not the precious tool of a 6th tier, but rather belonged to a 7th tier as he himself couldn't forge this kind of precious tool. Astonishingly, 2 7th tier items had appeared here. However, the 7th tier was immortal, and now the corpse of a 7th tier and a broken weapon of a 7th tier were found. Ultimately, whose hands had caused this? Zhou Hong thought for a while before saying, theoretically speaking, a 7th tier can die. However, it's not like being killed by someone, but rather that he can collapse his mind himself. Even if the physical body is immortal, what remains will just be a dead soul. Ling Han nodded. A 7th tier couldn't be killed because the body was too strong, and there wasn't any kind of power that could penetrate it, so it was naturally indestructible, but suicide would be an entirely different matter. But, does a 7th tier have a reason to commit suicide? This was the critical point. Which 7th tier would commit suicide? Could one have cultivated himself into an idiot? Ling Han looked at Zhou Hong, while Zhou Hong also looked at him. They couldn't figure out why a 7th tier would commit suicide. This dimension is much more complicated than we have imagined, and, quite possibly, hiding some world-shaking secret, Zhou Hong said. Indeed, only this dimension had heavenly venerable stone, and could also produce great herbs that could be used by even heavenly venerates and even heavenly venerable seals. It should be known that heavenly venerates were hated by the heaven and earth, so how could the heaven and earth produce heavenly venerable seals to help the heavenly venerates? Not much consideration had been given to this matter before, because it was a wonderful thing, but when the 7th tier corpse was found, everything became weird. Chapter 2870, 2879th Great Seals all completed. Chapter 2870, 2879th Grade Seals all completed. 2879th Grade Seals all completed. There's a problem now, Ling Han said. This dimension, is it a part of the Genesis world? There was a 7th tier heavenly venerate here. Though it was only a corpse, it did prove that there had once been a 7th tier heavenly venerate here, which meant that this dimension was a transcendent dimension. However, why weren't there any historical records of this dimension? It had been devoured by hysteria? Apologies, that would mean there wouldn't be the slightest bit left of it. It would definitely not be like how it was like now. But what kind of power could destroy a transcendent dimension then? Could it be accomplished by a 7th tier? There was a thick layer of mystery around it, and this was utterly baffling. This world is too big, and there is heavenly venerable stone that is capable of cutting off divine sense at that. To explore it completely, it would take much too long, Zhou Heng mused ruefully. Ling Han nodded. I plan to walk around and explore this dimension for a bit. That's good. Zhou Heng nodded. Just cultivating behind closed doors in seclusion would not produce a 7th tier. However, Ling Han still went into seclusion first, mastering the 2 newly obtained heavenly venerable seals. In this way, the number of seals he had mastered had already reached as many as 113. Merely in terms of numbers, there were probably not many that could compare to him. Next, he would have to think about increasing the number of heavenly venerable seals. In that case, he would have to seek out heavenly venerable stone mines himself. What raw stone lane would welcome him? Just look at those real grandmasters of raw stone. Who among them would appear in a raw stone lane? For those like Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu, they were only 2nd-grade characters, only understanding and comprehending partially, and had only been lucky, unlike Grandmaster Xianlai, who was really capable of picking out treasures. Ling Han set out with the Empress and Hun Niu. This time, Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing did not follow him. Mainly, it was because Fu Tianqing was about to advance to the heavenly venerable tier, so Ling Shi wanted to accompany him as he traveled to various dimensions, extracting the power of dimension from each dimension. Because there were not so many newly formed small worlds that were ready for plucking, Fu Tianqing did not walk the path that Ling Shi had taken, but rather emulated Ling Han and the Empress. As for whether he could break through his shackles, surpassing the Empress and being like Ling Han, that would have to depend on Fu Tianqing himself. Ling Han and company set out. They had no aim, and were simply roaming the mountains and plains here, searching for fated opportunities there, as well as trying to find the lost history. Just what exactly had destroyed this dimension? The answer could possibly have very serious implications. As they traveled, Ling Han spread out his divine sense, searching for veins of ore. Actually, it was easy to explore a mine. Every heavenly venerate was capable of that because the unique trait of heavenly venerable stone was cutting off divine sense, so one only had to spread out their divine sense and see where it encountered a large-scale barrier. In the latter case, there had to be a vein of heavenly venerable stone or laid out ahead of them, or beneath the spot. However, finding veins of ore and finding good veins of ore were completely 2 different matters. There were really too many veins of ore here, but the majority of them were useless. All they contained was scrap stone. Hence, one would need a grandmaster of raw stone to assess and evaluate if this vein of ore was valuable enough to excavate and open up. After all, even if one had great power, there would be no way to apply this great strength in something like opening a mine. One had to carefully and cautiously dig. If there really was treasure, such as a great herb, it could be very easily damaged. It was even more convenient for Ling Han. With a sweep of divine sense, he could clearly see what was contained inside the vein of ore. However, the larger the vein of ore, the more time he would need. Just like how most raw stones turned out to be scrap stones, it was the same for veins of ore. The biggest part of it would be blank, so it was not that easy to achieve results. A whole 30 years later, Ling Han finally discovered a small vein of ore which contained treasure. His speed of excavating the vein was astonishing because he knew the spots which contained treasure and the spots that contained nothing. He could completely bulldoze forward, unleashing the full power of a heavenly venerate. Hence, after only half a year, he had completely emptied out this vein of ore. He obtained 7 heavenly venerable seals, 3 great herbs, and even more divine metal, almost enough to fill a spatial tool completely. He gave 1 heavenly venerable seal to the Empress and Hun Nyo, respectively. The 3 of them had reached an agreement. Ling Han would first gather the 999 heavenly venerable seals, and if he encountered any duplicates, only then would they be given to the 2 women. Hence, these 2 seals naturally were seals that Ling Han already possessed. Another 60 to 80 years passed, and Ling Han's harvest was increasing, but it was also harder and harder to achieve results. Every force would be recruiting or nurturing their own grandmasters of raw stone, and they would be exploring and digging veins of ore all over the world. So there were fewer and fewer valuable veins of ore. Ling Han showed a hint of pleasant surprise. "What is it? Found something?" the Empress asked. Ling Han smiled and nodded. "I really did. This was a vein of, or that had already been abandoned." Ling Han was simply trying his luck, yet discovered that there really was something that was contained inside this vein of ore. However, this vein of ore was huge, but there were actually just 3 heavenly venerable seals inside. Everything else was just scrap stone. It was no wonder that it would be abandoned. They couldn't even be bothered to excavate it. There was no need to waste this time. Ling Han dug out those 3 heavenly venerable seals, and after refining and mastering them, he couldn't help but look overjoyed. In his mind, 111 seals were glowing at the same time, resonating with one another, and causing his powers of dimension to surge majestically, especially those powers of dimension extracted from low-level dimensions. The speed of their growth was shockingly rapid. This was having gathered the whole set of 9th-grade seals. Ling Han laughed loudly. Perhaps he was the first person in the world to have gathered so many combination seals. When the Empress and Hun Nyo found out, they naturally were happy for him and very curious as well. Just how much can they boost battle prowess? Ling Han attempted to channel these seals. Instantly, his whole body was glowing, exuding an indescribable majesty. He threw a punch. Pong, pong, pong. Space shattered violently, and the ground was destroyed and crumbled. Even the restraints of this dimension had been opened, with endless void energy surging in. This was both because the might of his punch was too terrifying, and because this dimension was dead. Without the suppression and balance from the power of heaven and earth, it was too easy to destroy it. 222 times. Ling Han exclaimed in pleasant surprise. 111 heavenly venerable seals could increase battle prowess by 222 times after they were combined. It might seem as if every single seal had only doubled the power, which was not amazing, but it should be known that these seals originally could not be superimposed. Now, I am confident that I can overwhelm all other 4th tiers. Ling Han broke into a grin. If he were to battle the highest North Heavenly Venerate and the others again now, he would not need to defeat them one at a time at all, nor would there be any need for him to use that broken saber. He would only have to confront them with a full offensive, and it would be an overwhelming victory. This is just the 9th-grade seals. If I could combine all the 1st-grade seals, just how much could they boost my battle prowess? Furthermore, if all 999 heavenly venerable seals could be combined, just how terrifying would that be? Ling Han was curious, and even more so expectant. Would it be so violent that even my body would not be able to sustain it? He thought. This was not impossible. If all the heavenly venerable seals were combined, it could increase his power by 10,000, 100,000, or even more. It was absolutely normal that his body would not be able to sustain his kind of great power. Let's continue forward. They began searching again, but the mountains on the surface had more or less been completely explored and searched by the various great forces. If they wanted to find any veins of or now, they would have to go deeper underground. Ling Han and company thus set out on this path. They explored and searched beneath ground, and after a great many years, they actually entered a cave. This place was not naturally formed, but rather manually dug out. The traces are still very new, Ling Han assessed. Someone has surpassed us and is now ahead of us. Chapter 2871, 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. Chapter 2871, 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. The competition now was extremely fierce. The veins of or on ground level had already been more or less distributed, and the few remaining veins of or were also being fought over by the various forces, which resulted in great conflicts. This situation was destined to create rivers of blood, and even heavenly venerates could not be detached from it. Hence, some forces had directed their attention beneath the ground. Perhaps there would be some places deeper underground that also possessed veins of or. However, if veins of or were really discovered underground, the difficulty of excavating them would also be much higher because the further underground it was, the greater the pressure would be. There were also terrifying levels of heat that even a ninth heaven celestial king would frown at there. If that really was the case, then the only course of action was for heavenly venerates to step forth personally. Let's go, let's go, let's go, Hunyo urged. The three of them were not the type to be afraid of trouble. Moreover, something like a vein of or did not belong to anyone. It was definitely not a matter of first come, first served, but rather depended on strength. The three of them continued onwards. This passage was shockingly extensive, and when they reached a certain point, the heat here also reached a considerably high temperature. It was not manifested from the regulations of fire. Firstly, that would not be able to affect heavenly venerates, and even ninth heaven celestial kings could easily withstand such heat, and secondly, the heaven and earth of this place had long since died, so how could there possibly still be any regulations existing? This heat was because the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world were endlessly clashing and conflicting, which created such high temperatures, and this kind of heat was definitely not something that could be withstood by power of regulation. Hence, even a ninth heaven would find it difficult to endure this. Barging in forcefully would only result in them being burned into ash. Ling Han and the others naturally were unafraid. Their strength was too great. Mere heat generated from the friction of fundamental particles was far from capable of making them feel wary. However, after they delved deeper, it was not only the high heat that was scorching, there were also flames wafting here and there. This was the display of even more intense clash and friction of fundamental particles, and even Ling Han and the others did not dare try to withstand the flames with their bodies. They would be throwing punches, delivering palm strikes, or using their heavenly venerate tools to send these flames flying or snuffing them out. If it was a first tier, they would only be able to dodge when they encounter this kind of flames, Ling Han said. A first tier had only mastered the unique power of a specific dimension, but if they came here, they would actually not be much stronger than a ninth heaven, because this was a dead place. There was no unique power here or regulations for them to extract at all. When the power stored inside their body was completely exhausted, their battle prowess would decline drastically. There were also unique stones as well as crystals here, but they did not have any value for cultivation. Ling Han examined them closely and deduced that these were only the end products of being tempered by the fundamental powers. The people ahead of them did not just have a small lead. Though Ling Han and the others were moving very quickly, they had still not managed to catch up with the people in front of them even after over a dozen days had passed, and it was unknown how far deep underground they had ventured. This was a dead dimension and could not possibly nurture any mysterious space. It only had so many layers, after all. At most, we should be able to reach the land's heart in 7 days, Ling Han estimated. In a real dimension, a core existed and had great value, but would this dimension have a core? It should have long since been destroyed, the Empress said. After all, this dimension has long since died, and the core is the source of power for the whole dimension, just like the heart of a human being. It should have long since stopped functioning. Perhaps there are still some remaining shards? Hunyo asked, clapping her hands. Let's quickly go and snatch it. Even a dead core of dimension would have great value, especially when this dimension had once been a transcendent dimension. Its value should be immeasurable. Ling Han nodded. Then let's speed up. They increased their speed and forged on at full speed. Another 5 days passed, and they finally could sense some life ahead of them. Aside from outsiders, it was impossible for there to be any local residents here. They had caught up with them. The three of them exchanged looks, and they immediately discovered that the people ahead of them had also stopped and were no longer moving. Clearly, the other side had also discovered their presence. Let's meet them. Ling Han walked ahead, and after walking for another while, 7 people appeared ahead of them, as expected. The 7 of them looked to be of varying age, having both men and women, but every single one of them was exuding the unique aura of an elite. All of them were heavenly venerates, and the weakest was a 1st tier, while the highest should be a 4th tier. After all, Ling Han was only a 2nd tier heavenly venerate, and being able to match a 4th tier did not mean that he could see through to the depths of a 4th tier. Scram! The 7 people on the other side had also spotted Ling Han and the others. When they discovered that the strongest among them was only a 3rd tier, a youth in black robes immediately called out to them coldly. It was just a 3rd tier, and he actually gave them a scare. "Little Hu, watch your words," an elder in red robes reprimanded. He chuckled. "Please don't take it to heart. This brat has just advanced to the heavenly venerable tier not too long ago, so he is quite proud. It is inevitable that he would be a little condescending and arrogant." "It's fine," Ling Han said smilingly. He glanced at the youth in black robes and mentally noted down that he was going to beat up this guy. The elder in red robes continued, "We are close to the land's heart by now. Why don't we go together so we can watch out for one another?" In the eyes of others, this was a very good thing. An elite that was at least 4th tier was earnestly inviting them to go with them. Wouldn't that mean that they now had a protective talisman? Ling Han also smiled. Though this is a dead dimension, it has once been a transcendent dimension, after all. It is possible that the core of the dimension will still have tremendous might and will be extremely dangerous. Precisely. Hence, it is even more necessary for the 3 of you to cooperate with me. The elder in red robes laughed loudly. Ling Han shook his head. How would I know that Senior truly wants to protect us, or is using us as scouts to test the dangers that lie ahead? The elder in red robes faltered, and then laughed loudly. Brat, you are very clever. Thank you for the praise, Senior. Ling Han appeared very modest. However, you have become a victim of your own cleverness. The expression of the elder in red robes became sinister. Since you have already predicted that, I can't be bothered to waste any more words either. Just scout out the way in front of us obediently. And if I refuse? Ling Han asked. Then your only path is death. These words were not spoken by the elder in red robes, but rather by a woman in purple robes. She was very beautiful, but compared to the Empress in Hunyo, her beauty was far too inferior. In the world of today, the deaths of a few heavenly venerates would not be worth much at all. A sturdy man of broad build commented calmly, as if he was offering a reminder, which was also a threat at the same time. Ling Han laughed. Aren't you guys afraid that I have a father who's a 6th tier or 7th tier? Do you? The woman in purple robes demanded disdainfully, her expression extremely harsh and unkind. Ling Han shook his head. No, but my grandfather. What about your grandfather? The sturdy man asked, his expression slightly serious. If Ling Han really had a grandfather who was a 6th tier or 7th tier, then they would have to treat him seriously. Even if they wanted to kill him, they had to make sure that it was done secretly and soundlessly. Not the slightest bit of news could be allowed to leak out at all. His grandfather is not a 6th tier or 7th tier, either, but has rather died long ago. Hunyo giggled. Fuck, are you guys playing around with us? Without waiting for the 7 of them to react, the Empress's mischievous nature was completely stoked as well, and she began, But our master. What about your master? He is a 3rd tier, Ling Han said smilingly. The 7 people on the other side exchanged looks, and were all outraged. You guys are really too arrogant, aren't you? Even now, you people still dare to make empty boasts and tease us? You're going to regret refusing us. The sturdy man stepped out. He was a third tier, and he was certain he alone would be able to suppress Ling Han and the others. Let me. The Empress took a step forward. Let Nyo deal with it. Hunyo hurriedly stepped forward as well. She wanted to compete with the Empress all the time. Chapter 2872, 2,872 Scouts. Chapter 2872, 2,872 Scouts. 2,872 Scouts. You people can attack together, the sturdy man said carelessly. He was a third tier, and on the other side, there was a third tier and a second tier in truth. With the gap of a cultivation level, and without a large enough number of second tiers, they were all trash in front of a third tier. Hence, while it looked like he was fighting two people at the same time, it was actually more of a one-on-one battle. Ugly, you were the one who said it, Hunyo said. Make your move, the sturdy man stated evenly, appearing to be absolutely confident. The reason why he had said so much nonsense was naturally because both Hunyo and the Empress were too beautiful. Even if he did not have any ideas in that direction, admiring this kind of beautiful women for a while longer was still enjoyable. Hunyo turned and said to the Empress, "Let's beat him up." The Empress nodded. Though they frequently argued and fought, whenever they were faced with an external enemy, they naturally would join forces against this external foe. Shio. The two women rushed out simultaneously, blasting towards the sturdy man. Pong, pong, pong. The two women unleashed their full battle prowess, their bodies surging with boundless light that crushed the ground all around them. Expanses of the ground crumbled, but they could not collapse at all, as they were turned into dust by their combined power. Heavenly venerable seals were flickering on their bodies, greatly boosting their power. The Empress had a heavenly venerable seal that she had created herself which was capable of boosting her power by 22 times. And though Hunyo did not have such good luck, Ling Han had also unearthed a raw stone, giving her a 7th grade seal which could multiply her power 24 times. This naturally was terrifying. The two women rushed forwards, possessing the dominating aura that seemed capable of destroying everything. The sturdy man involuntarily paled. Hunyo's battle prowess had already exceeded his expectations, but that was still reasonable. After all, if he was inferior in terms of heavenly venerable seals, that was only a matter of luck. Furthermore, it was not like there wasn't a chance for him to make up for the difference in the future. But the Empress's strength was inconceivable. She was a second-tier heavenly venerate. No matter what kind of heavenly venerable seal she was using as a boost, she should not be so powerful. This battle prowess was not inferior to a third tier's at all, so wasn't it ridiculous? He was stunned, yet he had no choice but to react. He punched out both fists, meeting the oncoming attacks from the two women. "Don't!" the elder in red robes hurriedly called out. He was a 4th tier, so he naturally could see more clearly. Hunyo's and the Empress's battle prowess had both already reached the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Even one of them alone was not someone that the sturdy man could handle by himself, what more when it was their combined power. If he faced them head-on, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Unfortunately, his words came too late. With how fast heavenly venerates were moving, their attacks would already be delivered with a mere thought. Boom! The power of the three of them clashed forcefully, causing a resounding explosion, and the sturdy man was sent flying like a cannonball. Pong, pong, pong. Originally, there had been no further path ahead of them, yet this sturdy man had forcefully opened up more of the path. He was a heavenly venerate, with tough skin and a powerful body. Tempered by the fundamental powers, the body of a heavenly venerate was extremely durable. The elder in red robes and his companions all turned their heads and saw that the sturdy man had finally stopped. He was lying on the ground, head drooping, as if he was a corpse. Thankfully, he had only been knocked out from the impact. How could a 3rd tier die so easily? The elder in red robes could see very clearly. If that sturdy man had not been so careless, confronting the two head-on, he definitely would not have lost so quickly. However, he wanted to clash with force, even when his strength was not enough. In that case, there was naturally no need to wonder about the results. The elder sneered. You do have some strength. No wonder you dared to even look down on me. However, a third tier is only a third tier. After all, in front of me, the three of you will not be able to endure even a single finger. Old geezer, then let us test the might of this finger of yours, Hunyo declared, clapping her hands and looking completely naive and innocent. I'll oblige you. The elder in red robes moved. Wong, he indeed flicked out a finer. Pong, pong, pong. This passage had already been enlarged countless times with that strike previously, but the attack of a fourth tier was naturally even more terrifying, causing this space to again begin to collapse. Ling Han, the Empress and Hunyo called out simultaneously. At this time, it was naturally their husband's turn to step out. There was no need for them to call out. Ling Han had already moved. Otherwise, how could he have made it in time? He rushed out and was already standing in front of the two women, also tapping out a finger himself. Boom! The two powers clashed, instantly causing a frightening explosion. The fundamental particles here were ignited, forming a rolling wave of power which radiated in all directions. Pong, pong, pong. The woman in purple robes and the others, along with the sturdy man who had already passed out, were all dragged into the power wave. They were instantly tossed out several dozen kilometers away. The battle prowess of the fourth tier was too powerful. The elder in red robes showed a hint of surprise. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually really take this attack from him head-on. His eyes involuntarily narrowed. This was too freakish, wasn't it? A second tier was capable of matching a fourth tier. To say nothing of how no one else would believe this, even when he himself had seen it with his own eyes and experienced it personally, he had an abrupt feeling of absolute shock and disbelief. If it were not for the fact that it was he himself who had attacked, he would really suspect that this fourth tier had deliberately held back. Old geezer, your finger doesn't seem all that powerful. Hunyo deliberately mocked the red-robed old man. Both she and the Empress were standing behind Ling Han, so they naturally would not be affected by the shock wave. The elder in red robes had no response to that. A fourth tier should be capable of completely crushing a second and third tier, but the both of them had tied with this exchange of blows. What else could he say? Senior, since you are so willing to guide and support your juniors, why don't you open the way ahead of us then? Ling Han asked smilingly. The expression of the elder in red robes darkened involuntarily. He had previously said that he wanted to protect Ling Han and his group, but actually wanted Ling Han and the others to scout out the way ahead of them. After all, approaching the core of a dimension was an extremely dangerous task. And now Ling Han had actually turned around to demand he scouted out the way for them. This was really a turning of the wheel of fortune. The elder's eyes were cold. Junior, you have thought too much. Is that right? Ling Han's figure moved and charged towards the elder in red robes. Since the latter was unwilling, then he would beat him into submission. How dare you? The elder in red robes shouted coldly. Don't think that you really are capable of standing against a fourth tier, just because you possess power capable of matching fourth tier. These are two completely different matters. Wong. He channeled a heavenly venerable seal. This was a seal that he had developed when he had reached fourth tier, and he had spent about 3 epochs on it. Instantly, his power soared more than a dozen times over. Ling Han laughed loudly and channeled a 7th grade seal. Instantly, his power increased by over 20 times. Not only was his battle prowess not inferior to that of the elder in red robes, he had an advantage instead. The elder in red robes was shocked. How could a guy that did not have the backing of a 6th or 7th tier heavenly venerate be capable of mastering a 7th grade heavenly venerable seal? This was surreal. Ling Han threw a barrage of punches, clashing with the elder in red robes head-on. After sustaining a few blows, the elder in red robes could no longer endure it, as Ling Han punched him madly like a punching bag. Pong, pong, pong. His figure slid backwards, as if he was further expanding this passageway. The elder in red robes forced himself to stop, and had not even gotten his breath back when Ling Han attacked him again. It was another series of punches sent his way, blasting him backwards repeatedly and opening up more of the passage. Understanding finally dawned on him. Ling Han was doing this on purpose. He was using him like a human probe, testing out all the possible dangers that they might encounter on their way. Fuck, this guy was too merciless. The elder in red robes was fuming with fury. He was a 4th-tier elite, and he had actually fallen to the point of being a lowly scout. He wanted to commit murder. Arg. Pung. Ling Han's fist landed on his nose, instantly creating a stream of blood. The anger that had just arisen in him moments ago had also disappeared without a trace. Chapter 2873, 2873, Yet Another Dimension. Chapter 2873, 2873, Yet Another Dimension. 2873, Yet Another Dimension. The elder in red robes was extremely furious. He had never suffered such a great humiliation before, and it made him want to commit murder. However, as Ling Han's punches landed on his face one after another, the chill in his heart grew endlessly. He was no match for this young man. In this world, no matter how great the heaven and earth was, or how great the logic was, it was not more important than strength. Whoever was stronger would be able to crush all living beings and do whatever they wanted. Thus, his anger and defiance were all fake. If he continued to fight head-on like this, he would be done for. Furthermore, after calming down, he discovered that Ling Han was not only stronger than him in terms of heavenly venerable seals, but he also had the upper hand in terms of raw power. The Elder's power was roughly at the middle stage of the 4th tier, but Ling Han was at the late stage of the 4th tier. Therefore, with the amplification of the heavenly venerable seals, the difference in battle prowess between the two of them became even greater. Pung! Before he could finish his thought, he was sent flying again. Pung, pung, pung. Under the terrifying pressure, he destroyed an unknown amount of ground layers along the way with the impact. He was greatly alarmed. They had already been close to the land's heart, and now that they were so deep underground, it was likely that a hollow would appear at any moment, revealing the core of the dimension. The core of a transcendent dimension was incomparably terrifying, and even 7th tiers couldn't retrieve it. Now, even if this core had already been destroyed, just like how a dying tiger would still be mighty, perhaps 4th tier cultivators could still be killed by it. If he really died like this, he wouldn't be able to accept it even if he became a ghost. It would be too unfair to him. Junior, we can talk peacefully. Pung. He hadn't even finished speaking when he was already struck by another punch from Ling Han. His body involuntarily flew backwards. Pung, pung, pung. Like a sharp spear, nothing could stop his advance as he sank deeper and deeper into the ground. All of a sudden, he felt a lightness behind him. There was actually no ground layer blocking him. He was first taken aback, then shocked. He suddenly realized that they had probably reached the core of the dimension. All of a sudden, the hair on his body stood on ends. However, he immediately revealed a look of surprise. How was this the core of the dimension? It was a completely new world. Pung. Ling Han also followed closely behind, similarly revealing a look of surprise. He had actually entered a new world. There were mountains, great rivers, and seas here, but all of them were dried up now, leaving behind one massive depression after another, grains of sand filling the air. Strange, too strange. There was no dimensional core here. Although it did disappoint Ling Han, he wouldn't be too concerned. After all, countless years had passed, so it was normal for the dimensional core to be destroyed. However, the scene in front of him now was too shocking. He couldn't care less about the elder in red robes now. He unleashed his divine sense to probe this world. Husband. The Empress and Hunyo also appeared, their faces also showing surprise. What kind of place was this? Ling Han's expression became solemn, and he said, "This is a dimension. Aren't we presently in this primitive dimension?" Hunyo asked in confusion. Ling Han shook his head and said, "This dimension is different from that dimension. You're saying that these are two dimensions?" Understanding dawned on the Empress, and her expression also became solemn. "There's such a strange thing?" Hunyo was also stunned. and she tilted her head. Dimensions are isolated from dimensions, and a two-realm passageway can connect two dimensions, but is this considered a two-realm passageway? Ling Han shook his head and said, "This is definitely not a two-realm passageway." They had traveled through the two-realm passageways of the whole Genesis world. It could be said that they were extremely familiar with two-realm passageways, but this was definitely not the case now. "But I'm certain that this is definitely not a transcendent dimension," Ling Han concluded. "It's definitely two different dimensions." The three of them looked at each other and gradually came to a conclusion. Could it be that a supreme elite made a move and forcibly compressed the two dimensions together? The Empress muttered to herself, even a 7th-tier elite would not be able to compress transcendent dimensions together. At the very least, a single 7th-tier elite could not. Ling Han nodded. The two dimensions overlapped. Was this natural or man-made? If it was man-made, what kind of mighty power would be needed to achieve this? He knew that this dimension definitely possessed astonishing secrets, but this scene still far exceeded his imagination. On the other side, the elder in red robes also slowly came to his senses. It was actually easier for him than Ling Han to confirm this because he was in the 4th tier and had been in contact with 3 types of fundamental powers. He could say with certainty that the 3 fundamental powers he mastered were clearly weaker here. Previously, the primitive dimension was a transcendent dimension, but this was a high-level dimension. There was an entire level of difference. He racked his brains, but no matter how hard he thought, he could not figure out how this could have happened. A new dimension? Does that mean there would be new veins of, or here? The Empress's eyes lit up. She actually wasn't the type to be very curious, because she didn't care at all, so she immediately thought of something else. Ling Han was also delighted. This was a new dimension. Since he couldn't figure it out, there was no point in thinking about it. He looked at the elder in red robes. In that instant, he felt an urge to kill him to ensure his silence. The elder in red robes couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine, and he hurriedly broke into a run and fled. Heavenly Venerable tier elites were hard to kill, especially when they were of the same cultivation level. As long as one of them fled first, it was simply impossible for their opponent to catch up to them. Ling Han did not give chase. Since 2 groups of people had already entered this place, it meant that there were many people who had their sights set on the underground. It was possible that other forces had already entered this dimension from different entrances. Let's make the first move. They immediately began their exploration, searching for veins of ore. The result didn't disappoint them. Very quickly, they found a vein of ore, and within it were 3 heavenly venerable seals. However, Ling Han had already mastered these 3, so he let the Empress and Hunyo divide these seals between themselves. They continued to advance. They had to hurry up. Otherwise, when the various great forces focused their attention on them, this place would become just like the dimension above ground, where the resources would be quickly divided up among the major forces. Time flew by. After tens of thousands of years, this place gradually became lively, and more forces came here. Ling Han and the others silently made a fortune. They were the first batch of people to enter this place, and Ling Han's ability to detect new veins of ore was so powerful. With this head start, it allowed them to make a fortune. "Here's another vein of ore," Ling Han said. They were currently in a dried-up sea. Originally, this place was an oceanic trench, and it was extremely deep. Hurry up and dig, Hunyo urged. Ling Han smiled and used his great ability to directly extract the entire vein of ore, and then divided it in half, extracting whatever valuable objects there were. He suddenly frowned. "What is it?" the Empress asked. "Someone's coming. He's very strong," Ling Han said, looking into the distance. Shio, a figure came from the horizon, emitting a terrifying aura, as if even the heavens had to bow in submission. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. Meng Dong. Shockingly, the newcomer was Meng Dong. He had fought Meng Dong before. Although Meng Dong had admitted defeat in the end, he had not actually lost. This was a powerful opponent. "Little brother, we meet again." Meng Dong stopped and nodded at Ling Han. Now you know who I am, right? Chapter 2874, 2874 Might of the Ninth Grade Seals. Chapter 2874, 2874 Might of the Ninth Grade Seals. 2874 Might of the Ninth Grade Seals. Ling Han was completely puzzled. Who the hell would know who this person was? However, he didn't show this on his face, and he replied, of course. He planned to fish more information from this person. Oh, then tell me what you know, Meng Dong said, not falling for Ling Han's trick. He smiled as he looked at Ling Han. Fuck, this person is fairly alert. Ling Han shook his head and said, how can I tell you such a big secret just like that? What if you're trying to trick me? He continued to bluff. Ha ha ha. Meng Dong roared with laughter before nodding and saying, this is indeed a big secret, one so big that it can even upheave the heavens. However, little brother, it looks like you still haven't awakened yet. How strange. You're already at the second tier, so why haven't you awakened yet? He wore a puzzled expression as he stroked his chin. Ling Han shook his head, saying, since you're not willing to say, and since I'm extremely keen to know your secrets, I have no option but to capture you and make you speak. Meng Dong shook his head, saying, little brother, you're still a little too weak to capture me. Oh? Then why don't I give it a try? With a roar, Ling Han tossed aside the gigantic vein or that he had been holding before charging at Meng Dong. Boom, boom, boom. The two of them immediately started to attack each other, not holding back in the least. They both wanted to crush the other in the most dominant manner. However, even though Ling Han's cultivation had improved, Meng Dong's cultivation had improved as well. He had already reached the third tier. He was at the early stage of the third tier, and his power was already approaching the late stage and even peak stage of the fourth tier. However, it was unable to reach the fifth tier. This was because he wasn't freakish enough, so he was unable to surpass two entire major tiers. Moreover, the jump from the fourth tier to the fifth tier was far too large. Boom. The two of them continued to clash, with neither of them being able to gain the upper hand. Little brother, your older brother isn't going to go easy on you this time, Meng Dong said with a loud laugh. A large dragon rose from his back, yet looking closely, this wasn't genuinely a large dragon. Instead, it was a seal. After taking shape, it returned to Meng Dong's body. Wong. The symbol lit up, causing his power to instantly rise by an explosive amount. 39 times, to be exact. How impressive! Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. Apart from Meng Dong, he had never come across anyone else who could use a 6th grade seal. Meng Dong clearly wasn't supported by anyone at the 6th tier or 7th tier, so where had he obtained such a high-level seal from? Perhaps he had concealed his background? Or perhaps he was like Ling Han. When he ascended, perhaps heavenly venerable seals would automatically appear. Forget about it. Let me finish this fight first. Ling Han roared as he fought, activating the 4 direction seals and also increasing his power 39-fold. The seal would materialize with each punch that he threw and charge furiously at Meng Dong. Humph! Meng Dong was fearless, and he brutally shattered the seal that was rushing at him with a single punch. He was truly no inferior to Ling Han. He was far too powerful. They both channeled their heavenly venerate techniques, with Ling Han unleashing his fists of fury and Meng Dong starting to spit out weapons again. This technique was already ferocious to begin with, and the repulsive, spitting action caused Ling Han to become incandescent with rage. His fists became wild and brutal as he channeled his fists of fury to the extreme. Their battle was intense, yet they were still unable to determine a victor. Little brother, eat this strike. Meng Dong bellowed. His bones started to glow, forming a fuzzy seal that radiated with a petrifying aura that could suppress the heavens. Meng Dong's power rose explosively at this instant, increasing at least 60-fold. Ling Han faced this strike head-on. Pong! He was sent flying back. Little brother, this is a 1st grade seal, Meng Dong said calmly. His body was glowing with unlimited radiance, and an air of chaos was pulsating in his exhalations. He was like a paramount deity as he walked toward Ling Han. The Empress and Hun Yo also heard this, and they couldn't help but feel stunned. Even though Ling Han had unearthed so many heavenly venerable seals, the most impressive of them had only been a 6th-grade seal that had multiplied his power over 30 times. Where had Meng Dong obtained this 1st-grade seal from? Little brother, obediently surrender yourself. When your older brother awakens your slumbering memories, I might even consider gifting you this seal, Meng Dong said with a chuckle. If he were being honest, then he would truly be the most generous person in the entire world. This was a 1st-grade heavenly venerable seal. Even 7th-tier heavenly venerates would covet it, right? Meng Dong would give it away just like that? Ling Han regained his balance, saying, "If I need it, I'll take it myself." Little brother, I've discovered that you really like talking big, Meng Dong said with a shake of his head. Against your older brother, how many exchanges do you think you can withstand? He charged over with vigor, with his battle prowess magnified over 80-fold thanks to the blessing of the 1st-grade seal. This was simply astonishing, with a single strike capable of severely wounding Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. With a single thought, countless seals instantly lit up on his body. What a surprise! You actually mastered this many seals? Meng Dong exclaimed with astonishment. However, what does that matter? It's merely quantity with no quality. No matter the quantity, it's still nothing but a waste. He charged over again, yearning to suppress Ling Han. Ling Han remained silent as he replied with a punch. Pong! A stunned expression instantly washed over Meng Dong's face as he was involuntarily sent flying back. He became quicker and quicker, eventually crashing into an extremely distant mountain with a thunderous impact, blasting it into oblivion. This was a combination seal formed from 111 9th-grade seal set, could increase his power by 222 times. Whoosh! Meng Dong shot out from the rubble, his entire right arm gone. This was the price he paid for facing Ling Han's attack head-on. With Ling Han's power 100 times greater than his, this result was naturally inevitable. He wore a stunned expression, disbelief in his eyes. He was actually this fragile and helpless. Combination seal, he spat through gritted teeth. That's right, Ling Han replied. However, he didn't waste any time, immediately charging over again. 9th-grade seals. Meng Dong muttered, the veins in his face bulging out. 9th-grade seal had always been a synonym for trash. Just like with the gulf between the 1st heaven and the 9th heaven, there was no comparison between 1st-grade seals and 9th-grade seals. After forming a combination seal, however, things would be completely different. At that time, 9th-grade seals could turn the tables and rival 1st-grade seals. Pong, pong, pong. Ling Han started to pummel Meng Dong. Their battle prowess was no longer on the same level. Meng Dong was like a ragdoll at this moment, sent flying left and right with no strength to resist. He was already unable to spit out any more weapons. Instead, he was violently spitting out blood. Little brother, you truly can't be underestimated, he remarked with emotion. He spat bucket loads of blood with each word, and his entire body was full of broken bones, made starkly clear by his caving flesh. He unleashed a roar, saying, I have no other choice. I can only call for a helper. His voice was thunderous, and pushed out with his mighty power, it was able to travel into the distance at an astonishing speed. He still has a helper. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. However, his attacks became even more rapid. Since his opponent had a helper, it was naturally important for him to finish this battle even quicker. Otherwise, once his power ran out, it would be difficult to say who would end up dead. Yet, Meng Dong's helper arrived even sooner than Ling Han anticipated. In just a few seconds, a figure had already flown over from the distance. It was a slender and attractive figure. She was a beautiful woman with a blossom-like appearance and a graceful and seductive demeanor. Meng Dong, you're actually unable to defeat our little brother? The woman said with a silvery laugh. Her impressive breasts bounced as she spoke, a truly provoking sight for the eyes. Chapter 2875, 2875 Forced to Retreat. Chapter 2875, 2875 Forced to Retreat. 2875 Forced to Retreat. Lucia, aren't you going to hurry up and help me? Meng Dong yelled. His situation was far too miserable at this moment. Not only had he lost an arm, but there was even a gaping hole in his chest. In fact, this hole was almost in the position of his heart. However, there was nothing he could do about this. Right now, Ling Han's battle prowess was truly at the epitome of the 4th tier. Without a battle prowess at the 5th tier, it would simply be impossible to suppress him. Only at this moment did Lucia's expression become serious. She didn't say another word, instead charging over in a free and elegant manner as if she were walking on clouds. Boom! She unleashed a palm strike that carried with it a devastating might, causing everyone to suddenly realize that she was also terrifyingly powerful. She was also at the early stage of the 3rd tier, yet her battle prowess had already soared to the peak stage of the 4th tier. She was no weaker than Meng Dong. Meng Dong naturally wouldn't leave Lucia to battle Ling Han alone, so he immediately charged forward to help her. With the two elites combining their power, the might of their attacks went up by another notch. Scram! Ling Han roared. He unleashed a furious punch, backed by his explosive power that had increased over 200-fold. He displayed his invincible might. Pung! Pung! Lucia and Meng Dong were both sent flying. Meng Dong, this little brother is far too ferocious, no? Lucia said as she spat blood. Can't you see? Can't you see that he's mastered over 100 combination seals? Meng Dong humphed in reply. I thought he was trying to scare people with all these seals, Lucia said. These two people were truly able to maintain their calm and composure. They were clearly at a disadvantage, yet they still continued to chat and poke fun at each other. It was as if they didn't know the meaning of fear. Ling Han roared as he continued to press his advantage. Lucia and Meng Dong exerted all their strength, yet they were still unable to rival Ling Han. They were sent flying left and right. However, they knew that as long as they could withstand this period of attacks from Ling Han, his battle prowess would definitely start to decline. The problem was, if they insisted on continuing to struggle like this, there was genuinely a possibility that they might be killed by Ling Han. Right now, the gulf in battle prowess between them was far too great. Let's retreat, Meng Dong said with an exasperated shake of his head. I've been waiting for you to say this, Lucia said. She was extremely resolute as she immediately turned around to flee. Meanwhile, Meng Dong fled in the opposite direction. That way, Ling Han could only pursue one of them. Ling Han didn't hesitate for a single second as he shot off after Meng Dong. However, just as he moved, he heard Lucia's voice travel over, Little brother, have you forgotten about your two beloved wives? Ling Han immediately stopped in his tracks when he heard this. If Lucia came charging back while he pursued Meng Dong, would the Empress and Hu Niu be able to defend against her? That was clearly impossible. Perhaps the Empress could rival her after advancing to the 3rd tier. Now, however, it was simply impossible for her to do so. Meanwhile, Hu Niu's ability to challenge those above her cultivation level was a big fat zero. Thus, there was naturally no way he could rely on her. Meng Dong's voice also traveled over. Ha ha ha, little brother. I hope you're awake in the next time we meet. If you're not, we'll bring even more friends to help you. Ling Han humphed in reply. He had only failed to capture Meng Dong because his battle prowess was still too weak to comprehensively suppress him. However, once he advanced to the 3rd tier, it would be a completely different story. At that time, he would suppress whoever dared to challenge him, however many of them there were. The Empress and Hu Niu walked over, both of them extremely astonished. Prodigies like Meng Dong should have been extremely rare. He was only slightly weaker than Lin Yulian and the others, or perhaps even at the same level as them. However, not only had someone like Lucia appeared, judging by his words, there were even more prodigies like him. Moreover, Ling Han was most likely one of them as well. It was just that he hadn't awakened yet. Just where had these two people come from? Don't worry about them. As long as we improve our own cultivation, we won't need to be afraid of anyone, Ling Han said, strengthening his resolve. Nothing would obstruct him from climbing to the peak of the cultivation world. The Empress and Hu Niu both nodded in agreement. They also possessed fearless determination and belief. The three of them continued to search for veins of ore. If they didn't hurry, the others wouldn't leave anything valuable for them. If they obtained heavenly venerable seals, they would naturally refine them straight away. Meanwhile, if they obtained great herbs, they would divide and use them evenly among themselves. However, great herbs were relatively easy to find, while heavenly venerable seals were extremely difficult to unearth. After hundreds of millions of years, they only managed to obtain a meager 36. Ling Han received 21 of them, and this allowed him to master a total of 139 heavenly venerable seals. Compared to the target of almost 1,000, this could only be considered the very beginning. Comparing the other heavenly venerates to him, though, most of them had only mastered the 7 generic seals. Anyhow, they managed to obtain quite some great herbs, and this allowed the Empress and Hu Niu to advance to the peak stage of the 2nd tier and the 3rd tier, respectively. However, because it was far too difficult to break through the barrier and ascend to the next major tier, neither of them took another step forward. Ling Han started to catch up to them, reaching the peak stage of the 2nd tier at an extremely slow speed. The Empress and Hu Niu were unable to ascend because their cultivation talent wasn't genuinely top-notch. It was because the Empress had fused together with the power of 100 dimensions while advancing to the 1st tier that she had gained the momentum to reach the 2nd tier without much resistance. However, with this momentum exhausted, it would be extremely difficult for her to ascend to the 3rd tier. As for Hu Niu, she didn't have many desires or wishes. However, this allowed her mind to become empty and pure, thereby making it easier for her to interact with the fundamental particles. It was because of this that her cultivation was ahead of the Empress. However, the more fundamental particles inside one's body, the more they would repel other particles. Thus, attempting to ascend wouldn't be an easy matter. This dimension was already cleaned up fairly well. Ling Han asked around a bit and found Zhou Hong and the others right now. Those from the outside dimensions had mostly arrived here already. Thus, Zhou Hong and the others had naturally set up a base here as well. Ling Han, Yu Borong has exited seclusion and is currently looking for you. Be careful, Lin Xiaoyang immediately warned when he saw Ling Han. Yu Borong was Yu Chengwang's father, and he was a 6th tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han had killed Yu Chengwang, so it wasn't surprising that Yu Borong wanted to hunt him down and kill him. It was merely unexpected that he had left it till so late. He was cultivating in seclusion before, so his strength has most likely gone up another notch, Zhou Hong said. How strong? Ling Han asked in curiosity. Chu Hao chuckled and replied, probably no weaker than senior brother Zhou. Zhou Hong rolled his eyes in reply, saying, your strength is similar to mine, so him being no weaker than me also means that he's no weaker than you. That being the case, why reply in such a roundabout manner? Lin Xiaoyang shook his head and said, both of you started later yet have pulled ahead. Meanwhile, only my strength is stagnant and not improving a single bit. I've already been left behind by you two. Chu Hao and Zhou Hong both consoled their senior brother. In fact, being able to reach the 6th tier already proved that he was a prodigy for the ages. After all, the number of 7th tier heavenly venerates could be counted on 2 hands. Ling Han asked the 3 6th tier elites about why the 2 realms had overlapped. I don't know, Zhou Hong immediately replied with a shake of his head. The 3 of us have discussed all kinds of possibilities. However, reality has proved that none of our speculations are correct. What about that ancient corpse? Ling Han asked. This was also a big mystery. A 7th tier elite had actually died. This was far too unfathomable. That person was indeed a 7th tier heavenly venerate, Lin Xiaoyang said. My father and the other 7th tier heavenly venerates found some time to investigate the corpse, and they think that this heavenly venerate died due to an extremely powerful impact. Ling Han was astonished. Shouldn't 7th tier heavenly venerates be indestructible and undying? Who can kill 7th tier elites? Was he killed by several other 7th tier elites? Zhou Hong shook his head. This impact was far more powerful than what 7th-tier heavenly venerates can unleash. To say nothing of a few 7th-tier heavenly venerates, even a team of 100 7th-tier heavenly venerates will be unable to unleash such a powerful strike. Ling Han found this even more mysterious. Even 100 7th-tier heavenly venerates would be unable to do this, so perhaps a group of several hundred 7th-tier heavenly venerates had attacked in unison? However, if there had truly been so many 7th-tier heavenly at that time, then why had they all disappeared now? Chapter 2876, 2876, Calling Reinforcements. Chapter 2876, 2876, Calling Reinforcements. 2876, Calling Reinforcements. And this saber as well. Zhou Hong retrieved a broken saber and handed it to Ling Han. Sure enough, the ability of 7th-tier elites is extraordinary. Even with the three of us working together, it still took a huge amount of work to refine the murderous aura within it and make it gather together. If it's activated, it will now unleash a murderous aura in a set direction. If you unleash it by surprise, even 5th-tier elites will be slightly affected. However, only slightly. Lin Xiaoyang added, in fact, this is mainly because this saber is broken, causing it to lose its previous might. Otherwise, even us three wouldn't be able to suppress it. Complete 7th-tier precious tools would contain the willpower of 7th-tier heavenly venerates, so it was only natural that they could suppress the heavens. Now, however, this saber was already broken, and the heavenly venerate willpower inside it had already vanished. It was because of this that the 6th-tier heavenly venerates were able to refine it. Ling Han accepted the saber. Thank you, seniors. He also retrieved some items that were wrapped in stone and handed them to Zhou Hong and the others. These were the heavenly venerable seals that he had obtained. He, Hun Yo, and the Empress had already mastered them, so he was now giving them away as a friendly gesture. Just how valuable was this broken saber? Even Xin Qihu had especially had someone stay here to search for it. However, Zhou Hong and the others had returned it to him after spending a huge amount of effort to refine it. In comparison, the three of them were far nobler in manner. Zhou Hong and the others laughed heartily as they accepted the heavenly venerable seals. They used the complete heavens ring to observe these heavenly venerable seals first, only keeping them if they didn't already possess them. Otherwise, if they directly absorbed all of them into their minds, and only severed them if they were already present, this would end up damaging their bodies. After they finished, there were still 3 heavenly venerable seals remaining. These were heavenly venerable seals that all 3 of them already possessed. Ling Han accepted them back. He would leave them for his son and daughter. Seniors, do you reckon there's another dimension under this dimension? He suddenly asked. We've also considered this possibility. However, the resources here are yet to be fully split, so we haven't set out to investigate this either, Zhou Hong replied. If there exists another dimension under this dimension, that will truly be a big matter. Dimensions overlapping one on top of another. This was something that had never occurred in the past. Just what in the world had caused this? To say nothing else, just the overlap of these 2 dimensions was already impossible to explain. Theoretically speaking, only the combined strength of several hundred 7th-tier elites would be able to forcefully overlap a transcendent dimension with a high-level dimension. However, from past to present, had there ever been this many 7th-tier elites? 7th-tier elites were indestructible and undying. So how had several hundred 7th-tier elites suddenly vanished without a trace? How was this possible? Perhaps an earth-shattering secret that can shake the foundations of the Genesis world is hidden in this place, Chu Hao said slowly. After chatting for a while, Ling Han took his leave. He toyed around with the broken saber, familiarizing himself with how to use it. This was very simple. As long as he activated it with his fundamental power, he would be able to unleash the might of the broken saber. However, because it was broken, it couldn't unleash the might of 7th-tier elites. Instead, it could only unleash power equivalent to Ling Han's. However, this saber had killed far too many elites before, so as long as he pointed it in a certain direction and activated it a second time with his willpower, It would unleash a devastating, murderous aura that could attack one's mind. This isn't enough to dispose of 5th-tier elites. However, if I unleash it by surprise, it will be enough to buy me some time to escape, Ling Han murmured to himself. He had killed Xin Qihu's subordinates, so Xin Qihu definitely wouldn't let things slide just like that. If they were at the same cultivation level, would Ling Han be afraid of Xin Qihu? However, this person was at the 4th tier, and his battle prowess had already soared to the 5th tier. Right now, Ling Han was definitely no match for this kind of opponent. He needed some ways to protect himself. Ling Han decided to stay put for the moment. For the past few years, he, the Empress, and Hu Niu had all relied on great herbs to elevate their cultivation. This wasn't something they had cultivated themselves, so it was inevitable that their cultivation was slightly unstable. Thus, they all decided to enter seclusion to stabilize their cultivation. This was especially the case with the Empress and Hu Niu. They still yearned to break through the barrier of their current cultivation level to ascend to a higher tier. As for Ling Han, even though he had already reached the peak stage of the 2nd tier, he was actually still some way off from breaking through. Moreover, there was a large number of powers of dimension inside his body, so even the final step before the breakthrough would require a lengthy amount of time. This was inevitable. This was the price for strength. Several 100 million years later, Hu Niu and the Empress advanced one after the other, with one ascending to the 4th tier and one ascending to the 3rd tier. The 4th tier was a dividing line. Combining all of the heavenly venerates in the myriad dimensions, the number of heavenly venerates under the 5th tier would be in the hundreds of thousands. This was a terrifying number. However, from the 5th tier onward, this number would start to drop drastically. Right now, there were around 1,000 5th tier elites and around 100 6th tier elites. There were even fewer 7th tier elites, with the total number possible to count on 2 hands. The reason for this was simple. From the 4th tier onward, the repulsion from the fundamental power would become far too powerful. Out of 10 4th tier elites, 9 would fail to detect new fundamental particles. Thus, how could they communicate with them and use them to advance? This was also why the orange-colored great herbs were so valuable. These were herbs that could allow heavenly venerates to detect fundamental particles. If one wanted to advance from the 5th tier to the 6th tier, one would most likely need to rely on crimson-colored great herbs. However, up until now, no such great herbs had been found. Ling Han also stabilized his cultivation. However, he was still far away from being able to advance. If he wanted to slowly cultivate by himself, to say nothing of one epoch, this would at least take him 100 million to 200 million years. He still needed a huge amount of supremely valuable great herbs. If he managed to obtain them, he would merely need to enter seclusion a few more times to stabilize his cultivation. Father, grandfather. Ling Han exited seclusion, only to see Ling Jianxue and Ling Fifan walking over. You two finally know to come back? Ling Han said with a shake of his head. After going out on an adventure, this father and son pair had already forgotten about their father/grandfather. Hee. Ling Jianxue and his son both chuckled as they recounted their experiences from the past years. Ling Jianxue had already advanced to the 2nd tier, while Ling Fifan had only just become a heavenly venerate. The genes of the Ling clan were far too powerful. However, this bloodline advantage only lasted for 2 generations, with Ling Fifan's children being nowhere near as freakish. They still had yet to become celestial kings. This great-grandson had been born several 100 million years ago. At that time, both Ling Han and Ling Fifan had been elsewhere. Thus, Ling Han had never met this great-grandson before. In any case, his descendants would naturally have their own fates and fortunes. Thus, he wouldn't stick his nose into every single matter. This was what Ling Han told himself. He pushed away the thoughts of wanting to personally raise his great-grandson, and he simply asked a little about his situation. This great-grandson was called Ling Tianhua, and he possessed a fairly decent cultivation aptitude. However, it was only decent and not freakish. To say nothing of Ling Han, Ling Jianxue, and Ling Fifan, he was still lagging far behind just compared to those of the same generation as him. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle at himself. If his bloodline could remain powerful for generation after generation, then wouldn't the descendants of 7th-tier elites all become heavenly venerates? If there's anything you want, just say it out loud, Ling Han said as he glanced at Ling Jianxue and Ling Fifan. Father, what are you trying to say? Are you saying that we wouldn't visit you otherwise? Ling Jianxue hurriedly said. Ling Han stood up, saying, I'm incredibly busy. If there's nothing important, then I'll continue to cultivate in seclusion. Wait. Ling Fifan exclaimed, hurriedly dragging Ling Han back. He then looked at Ling Jianxue and said, Father, what did I tell you? Grandpa is so brilliant and mighty, so of course he'll be able to see right through us. Enough with the flattery, Ling Han said. It's like this, Ling Jianxue said. While we were traveling around, we discovered a large mine that contains 10 veins of ores. However, a bunch of other people came before we could start digging. Our strength was similar, so choosing to fight would only have resulted in both sides being heavily wounded. Thus, we decided to settle things through a competition. We'll hold 10 battles, with each battle determining the ownership of a vein of ore. Father, we've come back to call for reinforcements. Chapter 2877, 2877, Can we have 3 more battles? Chapter 2877, 2877, Can we have 3 more battles? 2877, Can we have 3 more battles? Ling Han swept his gaze over his son. Sure enough, he would never return if not to ask for a favor. He would only remember his father when he had a favor to ask. Did they allow you to return to call for reinforcements? He asked. This was his son, so he would naturally help no matter what. We agreed that we could both invite helpers. However, the helpers can't be above the 2nd tier, Ling Jianxue said. Otherwise, what use would it be? After fighting to the death among ourselves, if the 3rd tiers and 4th tiers decide to take the mine for themselves, how can we compete with them? Ling Han was amused, and he said, So you're asking me to help? You want me to be that person who speaks up and sends them scrambling? Ling Jianxue shook his head, saying, Since we've already reached an agreement, we should play by the rules. Ling Han's son was a fairly stubborn and inflexible person. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. Being stubborn was a shared trait. But where had he learned the trait of being inflexible? So be it, since this is my son's decision. Ling Han nodded in response. I'll help you. And Auntie Xing and Auntie Hu as well, Ling Jianxue hurriedly added. Ling Han could only participate in a single battle. Ling Han pursed his lips and said, Your Auntie Xing has just advanced to the 3rd tier, and your Auntie Hu has just advanced to the 4th tier. Are you trying to break the rules? Ling Jianxue couldn't help but feel disappointed. He was someone who always kept his word. Meanwhile, Ling Fifan stood there murmuring to himself, saying that this was a world where might was right. Yet, his father was so stubborn and inflexible. So how in the world had he given birth to a mischievous son like him? Moreover, his grandpa was also full of tricks and extremely toxic toward opponents, yet somehow none of this had passed down to Ling Jianxue. Ling Han clapped his hands and said, All right, let's set off. The 3 of them set off. In Ling Han's eyes, this was only a small matter, so he didn't mind going over and helping out a little. 1 month later, they arrived at the foot of a large mountain. They then entered the mountain. After several more hours, a canyon appeared before them. There were already many people waiting there. They were mostly all heavenly venerates, and those who weren't were all at the 9th heaven. This dimension was far too difficult to reach, with the combusting fundamental particles forming a barrier that was extremely challenging for even 9th heaven celestial kings to pass. Drawing someone into a spatial tool to bring them over, that was also impossible. The combusting fundamental particles would affect even the space inside a heavenly venerate tool. Thus, bringing someone in a spatial tool would be nothing more than a death sentence. Indeed, Ling Han had also left the celestial guest residence in the uppermost space. He had no option but to do this. Thus, those who were here were all at least 9th heaven celestial kings. It was also because of this that the mines in the dimension were opened up a lot slower than the other dimensions. There were only 9th heaven celestial kings to use, and even the heavenly venerates would have to get down and dirty themselves. However, did heavenly venerates not need to cultivate? There was a severe shortage of personnel, which resulted in the mine being opened up extremely slowly. Otherwise, this was nothing more than a damaged high-level dimension, so the mine should have been cleaned up long ago. The people in the canyon were very clearly divided into two parties. The atmosphere was tense, and it was as if a huge battle might break out at any moment. Ling Jianxue, you were gone for so long, yet you only brought back a single helper, a solidly built man with messy red hair said. Ling Jianxue wore a slightly awkward expression. He had initially wanted to bring Hun Yo and the Empress over as well, yet he hadn't imagined that they would have already advanced beyond the second tier. This is my father, Ling Han, he introduced. The red-haired man clasped his hands and said, Friend Ling. The people in his camp all nodded toward Ling Han in greeting. It was clear that they were all allied with Ling Jianxue. Huh? Ling Han? This name seems fairly familiar, someone murmured. However, they didn't immediately recall why. Since the final person has arrived, let us begin the competition, someone from the other side said. Very well, let us begin. The two sides drew lots to decide who would send out a person first. They would then take turns afterward. After drawing lots, it was their opponents who would send a person first. After discussing for a while, they sent out a woman in pink who was as beautiful as flowers. After reaching the heavenly venerable tier, one would be able to transform themselves on a fundamental level. Being transcendent above the regulations, to say nothing of their appearance, they would even be able to freely change their aptitude. Thus, it was almost impossible to come across ugly heavenly venerates. There were only those who were more unique. I'm Yulan, who's willing to spar with me, the female heavenly venerate said with a smile. Ling Jianxue and the others also discussed it for a while before sending out a person. Their battle lasted 3 days, yet it was heavenly venerate Yulan who emerged victorious by a whisker. For the second battle, Ling Jianxue and the others sent a person out first. However, they suffered another loss. After 6 battles, Ling Jianxue's side suffered 6 losses in a row. This caused everyone's morale to be extremely low. Perhaps they were going to lose all 10 battles. For the 7th battle, it was their opponent who sent someone out first. It was an elegant young man. Gasp! Mi Wanbai is personally going to battle? Do they want to take this 7th battle in a single breath as well? They want to crush our fighting spirit? But Mi Wanbai is already at the peak stage of the 2nd tier. I heard that he more so fused together with the power of 7 dimensions while he was at the 1st tier, so his battle prowess far exceeds that of ordinary elites at the peak stage of the 2nd tier. We should just send some random person for this battle. We can still fight for victory in the final 3 matches. We'll strive to obtain 3 veins of ore. The cultivators on Ling Jianxue's side all wore apprehensive expressions. Their opponents had sent out their strongest member, and, truthfully speaking, not a single one of them could rival him. They would inevitably lose this battle. However, whom should they send? As heavenly venerates, all of them cared about their face. Thus, who would be willing to step forward to suffer a guaranteed loss? In fact, they might even suffer severe wounds from the battle. That would be a great misfortune. They all exchanged glances. However, no one stepped forward. Mi Wanbai smiled faintly and said, No one is going to accept this battle? Then I'll consider that a forfeit. I'll stay on for the 8th battle as well. How could he do this? However, who dared to oppose him? Ling Jianxue glanced at Ling Han and said, Father, it's time for you to do something. Ling Han's mind was elsewhere. He was currently observing the veins of, or here to determine whether there was anything valuable. Thus, he didn't hear Ling Jianxue's words. Only when his son nudged him with his elbow did he come to his senses. Ah, sure thing, he replied casually. He confidently strode forward. Everyone shook their head, lamenting that Ling Jianxue was screwing his father over. This battle was a guaranteed loss, and there was even a possibility of suffering severe wounds. Yet Ling Jianxue had actually convinced his father to accept the challenge? Just how dodgy was that? You're not going to forfeit? Mi Wanbai asked with a smile. Ling Han shrugged and said, I've never had such a habit. Mi Wenbai didn't get angry, and he said, then I'm so sorry, because you'll develop that habit in the future. Heh. Ling Han picked at his ears and said, Are you trying to defeat me by running your mouth? Mi Wenbai's smile froze. Running his mouth? It was Ling Han who was running his mouth, okay? His expression turned cold, and he said calmly, Enraging me will do you no good at all. Enough with the nonsense, Ling Han said as he strode over. Just how quick were heavenly venerates. Even though he wasn't going at full speed, he still arrived before Mi Wenbai in just 3 steps. He then threw a punch. What audacity! Pong! Before Mi Wenbai could even finish speaking, he was already sent flying by Ling Han's punch. Pong! 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 In a single breath, he crashed through a dozen or so mountains, and only then was his momentum stopped. He sank into a large mountain. Everyone fell silent, with many gasping in shock. This was simply inconceivable. That was Mi Wenbai. Yet, he had failed to withstand even a single strike. Ling Han retracted his fist, saying smilingly, Can I stay for the other 3 battles? Chapter 2878, 2878 Rematch. Chapter 2878, 2878 Rematch. 2878 Rematch. Upon hearing Ling Han's words, the cultivators on the opposing side hurriedly shook their heads. Even Mi Wenbai couldn't withstand a single strike from Ling Han, so anyone who dared to step forward would naturally be instantly defeated by him as well. If they allowed Ling Han to stay on for 3 more battles, that would simply be a matter of him throwing 3 more punches. At that time, another 3 veins of ores would be taken away by him. Ling Han? Ling Han. I remember now. Finally, the person who had felt a sense of familiarity with Ling Han's name clapped his hands, exclaiming, This was someone who had created history before. This was someone with peerless courage. Ling Han involuntarily sighed. Why couldn't the victor stay behind for more battles? What kind of crappy rule was this? He walked back to his spot. Meanwhile, those on his side still had yet to come to their senses. Their minds were still numb with shock. Afterward, Ling Jianxue stepped forward to battle. Taking advantage of Ling Han's remnant might that was still to disappear, with their opponents still reeling in shock, he also won his battle. However, their opponent finally came to their senses for the remaining 2 battles. Thus, they were able to nab the final 2 victories. As a result, their opponents won 8 of the 10 veins of ore, while Ling Han and the others could only take 2. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Throughout his cultivation journey, he had never been on the receiving end of an unfair deal. He had always enjoyed the upper hand. Now, however, they had actually lost, winning only 2 of the 10 veins of ore. This was utter humiliation. However, there was nothing he could do about this. Who told his son to be so stubborn and inflexible? Anyhow, how would they decide which vein of or belonged to whom? At this moment, Ling Han displayed his domineering side, not caring for others' opinions as he directly chose 2 veins of ores. He didn't allow anyone to oppose him. His words were, If anyone has any objections, tell me after you defeat me. Who dared to battle him? Just look at Mi Wenbai. He still had yet to regain consciousness. No one opposed him, so everything was settled. Ling Jianxue walked over and asked, Father, you're not some kind of raw stone appraisal grandmaster, so why are you randomly acting with such conviction? In fact, he had also invited a raw stone appraisal grandmaster over. After all, it was possible that the veins of ores would be worthless, so they naturally had to pick the most valuable ones. However, Ling Han's decision bypassed the raw stone appraisal grandmaster and left him with nothing to do. The grandmaster continued to murmur that Ling Han was acting far too willfully. Ling Han waved his hand and said, Ignore him. How could he be acting willfully? The 2 veins of, or that he had chosen were the most valuable ones. However, it had to be said that all 10 veins of, or were fairly decent, with not a single one of them being worthless. The next day, they all started to mine the veins of ore. There wasn't much personnel to use, so they all had no option but to do the hard work themselves. What did it matter that they were heavenly venerates? They still had to mine the ore personally. Moreover, they had already reached an agreement. Each person would keep whatever they unearthed. Everything would be down to luck. Ling Han naturally wouldn't hold back. In any case, if it weren't for him, these people wouldn't have even received a single vein of ore. He walked from one side of the mine to the other, drawing a large amount of valuable raw stone into his spatial celestial tool. After his comprehensive scan, even though there were still some raw stones left, how could there be anything of great value? Everyone felt a sense of frustration. After digging for half a day, why could they only find divine metal? Meanwhile, their opponents would obtain supreme great herbs from time to time. Even though they were only blue-colored or purple-colored, this was still enough to fill them with envy. This was all Ling Han's fault. Why had he insisted on picking these 2 veins of ore? However, they didn't dare to say anything. Yet, the raw stone appraisal grandmaster that they had invited wasn't afraid to speak his mind at all. His standing was transcendent, so taking advantage of their reliance on him, he continued to scold Ling Han again and again. This ticked Ling Fifan off, so he grabbed the grandmaster and gave him a good pummeling. No one stood up for the raw stone appraisal grandmaster, even though it was Ling Fifan who had acted, who didn't know that this was at Ling Han's behest. In any case, even if this were Ling Fifan's personal decision, he was still Ling Han's grandson, after all, so who dared to target Ling Fifan? This infuriated the raw stone appraisal grandmaster, who eventually stormed off in rage. With Ling Han's current standing, he naturally wouldn't pay attention to what a raw stone appraisal grandmaster thought of him. If he were annoyed, he could easily smash him to death with a single punch. Right now, however, he was entirely focused on the raw stones that he had unearthed. He was extremely satisfied. He silently made riches as he opened up the raw stones. In the end, he obtained over 20 great herbs and 7 heavenly venerable seals. However, it was a shame that he already possessed all of them. Thus, he gave all 7 of these heavenly venerable seals to his son. Along with these, he also gave him some great herbs. "Father, you obtained all of these?" Ling Jinshui asked in astonishment. Ling Han nodded in reply. Fuck. Who dared to accuse his father of acting willfully? This was already more than the sum of what their opposition had obtained from the 8 veins of ore. Because they only had 2 veins of ore, it wasn't long before they finished cleaning them up. Now, everyone would head over to the other side to take a peek every day. Even if they couldn't obtain these treasures, they could at least have a feast for their eyes. Comparing their gains, however, they couldn't help but feel angry. Was there any comparison? They grumbled in frustration, and this caused those on me one by's side to roar with laughter. Even though they had lost 2 matches, and therefore lost 2 veins of ore, Ling Han's willful decision had caused the other side to directly obtain the 2 least valuable veins of ore. This was equivalent to Ling Han giving them a big present. This naturally caused Ling Han to become the butt of their jokes. At the same time, he was also blamed by his own allies. However, Ling Han and his son and grandson remained silent as they bathed in the riches themselves. There was no need to tell everyone about this, was there? Moreover, everyone believed that he was a fool when it came to stone gambling, so perhaps he could still screw more people over. After a while, something unexpected occurred. After all 10 veins of ore were mined, another vein of ore surprisingly appeared underground. This vein of ore had been hidden underneath the 10 other veins of ore, which had acted as somewhat of a jacket. One had to realize that heavenly venerable stone could block the divine sense of heavenly venerates, so none of them had been able to detect this vein of ore. Even Ling Han had been unable to detect it. It was only when he saw it that he came to a sudden realization. However, there was only a single vein of ore, so whom would it belong to? Having seen Ling Han's strength, their opponents naturally didn't suggest another battle to settle things. Mi Wenbai and his companions racked their brains thinking about how to obtain this vein of ore. Eventually, they settled on a stone gambling competition with Ling Han. Everyone knew that only celestial kings could become raw stone appraisal grandmasters. This was because heavenly venerable stones had a special obstructive property against heavenly venerates. As if detested by heaven and earth, heavenly venerates were unable to become raw stone appraisal grandmasters. Of course, heavenly venerates weren't too annoyed by this. After all, heavenly venerable stones only existed in this one place, so there would eventually come a day when they managed to mine all of them. Mi Wenbai and the others' suggestion of a stone gambling competition was naturally met with fierce opposition from the red-haired man. After all, there wasn't a raw stone appraisal grandmaster among them. Ling Han had already caused him to storm off in rage. Thus, how could they compete? He insisted on settling things through a battle. Both parties refused to budge. This was until Ling Han spoke, accepting the proposal of a stone gambling competition. If they wanted to settle things through a battle, he would refuse to step forward. Thus, the red-haired man and the others naturally had no option but to accept this compromise. Apart from Ling Han, who else could suppress Mi Wenbai? But a stone gambling competition? Sigh. None of them held any hope. This was already a guaranteed loss. However, what could they do? Ling Han was so domineering, so who would dare to oppose him? How are we going to do this stone gambling competition? Ling Jinshui asked on Ling Han's behalf. We'll each pick 3 raw stones to put forward. We'll then compare their total value. Those on Mi Wenbai's side said. Very well, Ling Jinshui said, agreeing to these conditions on Ling Han's behalf. Mi Wenbai and the others immediately sent out their raw stone appraisal grandmaster. Everyone referred to him as Grandmaster Qian, with his full name being Qian Wang. He was at the 9th heaven, yet all of the heavenly venerates treated him as an esteemed guest. He was truly living a grand life. Qian Wang was extremely aloof, and he said to Ling Han, I don't bully others, so I'll allow you to pick 10 raw stones to compete with me. This was extremely arrogant, yet it was perfectly in line with the demeanor of raw stone appraisal grandmasters. They were far too spoiled at this moment. Ling Han didn't mind this, and he said with a faint smile, Sure thing. Chapter 2879, 2879 Outsider. Chapter 2879, 2879 Outsider. 2879 Outsider. When the red-haired man heard Qian Wang's words, hope rose in his heart. If he chose 10 pieces, what if he was lucky and all the pieces contained treasure, and the total value surpassed Qian Wang? Sometimes, no matter how strong one was, he would still cry when he encountered someone with luck that was off the charts. Choose first, Qian Wang said in an arrogant tone. When he had still been a celestial king one, he hadn't even been able to see a heavenly venerate, but now he could be surrounded by heavenly venerates and was treated with the utmost courtesy. This caused his favorable opinion of himself to spike sky high. Ling Han shook his head. This kind of person did not have the wisdom of Grandmaster Xianlai. He could be willful and arrogant for now, but there was a 99% chance that he would die on the streets in the future. Sure, Ling Han said nonchalantly as he casually walked around the vein of ore and dug out 10 raw stones. Qian Wang also started walking around. He walked back and forth a few times before finally choosing 3 raw stones. The red-haired man and the others all shook their heads. There was definitely no chance now. Look, the other Grandmaster of Raw Stone had taken such a long time to make his choice, yet Ling Han had just randomly picked 10 stones. How could this be compared? Open the stone, Qian Wang said calmly, putting on airs. Sure. Ling Han began to cut the stone. His power was extremely strong, and he knew the contents like the back of his hand. Thus, in just a few breaths' time, the contents appeared. This was a great herb, green in color. Fuck! Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. This luck was heaven-defying. A random stone could produce a supremely valuable medicine? Hope was reignited in the red-haired man. Green great herbs were extremely precious. Even if Ling Han's remaining 9 raw stones were all useless, he might still be able to win with this great herb. The mouths of Mi Wenbai and the rest twitched. So what if he was a Grandmaster of Raw Stone? He was no match against such good luck, right? Qian Wang's mouth was half gaping. He wasn't a first-generation Grandmaster of raw stone like Grandmaster Xin Lai, but belonged to the generation of his disciples and grand-disciples. They had some skills in stone gambling, but their abilities were far inferior to Grandmaster Xuanlai's. He knew that there were treasures contained in the 3 raw stones he had chosen, but he had no idea what these treasures were. Ling Han's first move was a green great herb, completely disrupting his plans and causing him to start panicking. How could Ling Han care about him? He continued to cut another raw stone. "Here's another treasure," everyone exclaimed. The second raw stone still revealed a great herb, but the grade was slightly inferior to the first. It was only blue. However, with 2 great herbs in front of him, Ling Han was practically unbeatable. Mi Wenbai and the others were about to fall into despair. What kind of luck did Ling Han have? Wasn't his luck a bit too good? The 3rd, 4th, and 5th raw stones were also cut one by one. They all contained great herbs. Not only did 2 green ones appear, but there was also a yellow one, which shocked and made everyone's eyes turn bloodshot. Qian Wang had already flopped onto the ground. Unless he unearthed 3 heavenly venerable seals in a row, he would definitely lose. However, Ling Han then unearthed 4 heavenly venerable seals in a row, completely cutting off his hopes. I admit defeat," Qian Wang said in a bitter tone. He looked meaningfully at Ling Han. This guy was definitely pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger too. He refused to believe that anyone's luck was this good, even if someone threatened to twist his head off if he did not. This was already expected, but hearing Qian Wang admit defeat personally, everyone still felt a sense of absurdity about the whole situation. Could it be that Ling Han was also a Grandmaster of raw stone? However, who didn't know that it was impossible for a heavenly venerate to become a Grandmaster of raw stone? That was absolutely impossible. However, no one would believe that Ling Han's luck was so heaven-defying, either. Ling Han smiled faintly, but didn't act ruthlessly. He turned around and said to Ling Jianxue, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up." The red-haired man and the others also came to their senses as if they had just woken up from a dream. Ling Han had one, so this vein of raw stone naturally belonged to them now, so they could start choosing stones. Wait. However, just as they were about to move, they heard a voice that carried an extremely terrifying pressure. Who was it? Everyone turned around and saw 2 people walking over. One of them looked to be in his 20s. He had a handsome face and a slender figure. He emanated boundless light, and his breath was filled with the air of primal chaos. He was incomparably terrifying. Meanwhile, the person beside him was only a 9th heaven celestial king. He seemed insignificant beside his companion's aura, but everyone's eyes were fixed on him. This was because he was the Grandmaster of raw stone that the red-haired man had invited previously, and Ling Han had driven him off in fury. They had not expected that not only had he returned, he had even brought an outsider with him. Clearly, they did not come with good intentions. "Who are you?" the red-haired man asked. Mi Wenbai and the others, on the other hand, acted as if it had nothing to do with them. In any case, this vein of or already belonged to Ling Han and the others, so they were happy to just sit by and watch the show. Pong! The response to the red-haired man was a punch from the young man. It was unstoppable and sent the red-haired man flying. "A mere second tier dares to be presumptuous in front of me," the young man said coldly. His gaze swept over, and a terrifying aura spread out, causing everyone to involuntarily lower their gazes, not daring to meet his eyes. "I'm Nailinda." He retracted his gaze. "Everything here belongs to me. You people can get lost." Yet Ling Jianxue looked at the Grandmaster of raw stone beside him and said, "Grandmaster Ho, we agreed that you had to keep this a secret." Grandmaster Ho sneered. "You publicly humiliated me and want me to keep it a secret for you. How laughable." Pong! The force of a punch surged over, and Grandmaster Ho was immediately turned into a rain of blood. Ling Han retracted his fist and casually dusted it off. Hiss! This guy was really bold. He killed just like that, not giving Nailinda any face at all. Nailinda's expression darkened. He was a 4th-tier heavenly venerate and could suppress everyone here single-handedly, but Ling Han actually dared to kill someone in front of him, and the man he had killed was one of his own at that. So how could he not be angry? He said menacingly, "How dare you? You even dare to?" Pong. He hadn't even finished speaking when he saw Ling Han's fist fly towards him. "You're courting death." Nayland humphed coldly and threw out his own fist to meet the attack. As he saw it, the power of his punch could instantly destroy Ling Han's attack, and then continue to attack without any loss of power, blasting Ling Han into pieces. Boom! The two forces collided, but the result was completely different from what Nayland had imagined. The power of his fist had collapsed with a single blow, and the force of Ling Han's punch was still surging over explosively. What? He turned pale with fright, and then looked at Ling Han. His entire body was glowing with the light of seals, and there were over 100 of them. This was... Boom! Power gushed over, and he was instantly blasted into a rain of blood. So what if he had been tempered by 3 fundamental powers? He couldn't withstand a single blow at all. One last thought flashed through his mind. These were combination seals, and there were shockingly many of them. Nayland was dead. Everyone's scalp went numb. So what if Grandmaster Ho was dead? He was only a 9th Heaven Celestial King, after all, and the so-called Grandmaster of Raw Stone was just an elevated status. However, Nayland was a genuine heavenly venerate, and his strength was definitely far above everyone else's. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to make everyone tremble with fear just by looking at him. Such an elite could not even withstand a single blow from Ling Han. Ling Han dispersed the heavenly venerable seals and acted as if nothing had happened. 4th tier? This wasn't the first time he had killed one of them. Chapter 2880, 2880 Xin Qihu Arrives. Chapter 2880, 2880 Xin Qihu Arrives. 2880 Xin Qihu Arrives. Large amounts of life essence surged into Ling Han's body, pushing his cultivation level further by a small margin. After all, Nayland was a 4th tier, which was equivalent to 2 or 3 green great herbs. I'll take my leave. I have something on too. I'll take my leave first. I don't have anything to do with the vein of or anyway, so I won't waste time. In an instant, most of the people had left. Everyone was afraid that Ling Han would suddenly make a move. This guy could even insta-kill a 4th tier cultivator. This was too terrifying. Previously, although everyone had known that Ling Han had been strong, they had believed that they could have still contended against him if they had joined forces. However, now that they had seen that even Nayland had been instantly killed, they were horrified and shocked. They knew that the difference in strength between them and Ling Han was too great. Ling Han didn't stop them. He naturally wouldn't take these people seriously. However, very quickly, someone walked over and said, "Ling Han, you have to be careful. Nayland has an elder brother, and he's a 5th tier heavenly venerate." Although 5th tier was only 1 level higher than 4th tier, the strength could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. Ling Han was astounded. These 2 brothers were both heavenly venerates, and one was in the 4th tier, while the other was in the 5th tier. This was a little shocking. Could it be that their old man was in the 7th tier? He asked that person in detail, but the answer he received was not what he had anticipated. The 2 brothers were actually from a very ordinary background, and they had relied on their own hard work to reach their current heights. If it had to be said, it was Nayland's elder brother, Nayland Xiong, who had taken great care of his younger brother. Otherwise, Nayland shouldn't have been able to reach the 4th tier, or at least not so quickly. Nayland Xiong was currently exploring a palace here with others. It had long been reduced to ruins. However, the fact that everything else here had been destroyed, but there was still a palace left behind, was enough to prove how extraordinary this palace was. Perhaps it was the palace of a 7th tier that contained an astonishing inheritance. Ling Han nodded at that person and said, "Thank you." That person smiled and said, "I am Yang Pe, and I hope to be able to meet Brother Ling again in the future." He wanted to form a good relationship with Ling Han, and perhaps it would be of great use in the future. Moreover, He would only be gaining from this at no cost to himself. It was just a piece of information or a clue, and there was no need for him to pay any price. No problem. Ling Han accepted this favor. Soon, only Ling Han, his son, and his grandson remained in the canyon. Ling Han continued to open stones. With his stone-searching ability to see, the speed at which he opened the stones was naturally astonishing. Very quickly, he had completely mined the entire vein of ore, and his harvest was astonishing. There were a total of 7 heavenly venerable seals, 13 great herbs, countless pieces of divine metal, and 1 piece of devouring metal. Ling Han planned to specially use great accomplishment level devouring metal to create a spatial tool which would be augmented with the heavenly venerate technique to form an ultimate defense. It wasn't that a separate dimension could not be created in the interior of the divine demon sword, just like the Black Tower back then. However, a precious tool that focused on offense was definitely not as good in defense as one that specialized in defense. Ling Han collected 5 of the heavenly venerable seals, and the remaining 2 were given to Ling Jianxue and his son. The great herbs were all given to Ling Han's son and grandson. With the abilities he possessed, obtaining great herbs could be said to be as easy as flipping his hand. Ling Jianxue and his son didn't return to the base, but continued to explore. The discovery of this dimension, or rather, this overlap dimension, was like a huge treasure that had been bestowed to all the heavenly venerates, and everyone could benefit from it. It was now or never. Meanwhile, Ling Han returned. He wanted to upgrade the newly obtained devouring metal, refine it into a precious treasure of heavenly venerable tier, and bring bewitching Maiden Ro, Lu Yutong, and the others over as well. He walked forward, and every step he took would bring him to an endless distance. Heavenly venerates ignored regulations, and there were no regulations here. Even 9th Heaven celestial kings could exert extraordinary speed. After walking for 3 days, Ling Han's heart suddenly stirred, and he stopped in his tracks. "Come, have a cup of tea with me." A vigorous and domineering voice rang out. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Drinking tea depends on the person. As for you, I don't seem to be very interested in joining you for tea." There was a pavilion up ahead, and in the pavilion, there was a person drinking tea. His white clothes fluttered in the wind, and he was a handsome man. It was Xin Qihu. "Ha ha ha." Xin Qihu laughed loudly. "You're indeed very bold. You have to know that even 4th tiers are nothing in front of me. They don't even dare to breathe loudly." "Congratulations, you've met your match," Ling Han said calmly. "My match? Not really." Xin Qihu shook his head. "If you were in the 4th tier, I might be able to view you as an opponent, but a mere 2nd tier? I'm only here to kill you." "Oh, do you dare to fight me at the same cultivation level?" Ling Han provoked. "Ling Han, with the height that I have reached, will provocation be effective on me?" Xin Qihu asked with a smile. He was already publicly acknowledged as the greatest prodigy of all eternity and could not be elevated any further. He also did not have to worry about falling off the pedestal. How could he act on impulse? Ling Han laughed and said, "Then what nonsense are you talking about? Let's fight." "You should have accepted my kind offer and helped me find veins of ore." Xin Qihu shook his head, appearing to be a little regretful. "Unfortunately, not only did you not agree, you even killed one of my men. Therefore, you must die." He made a move. Boom. With a flip of his right hand, the sky trembled, and countless heavenly bodies were born and destroyed in his hands. One exhalation was equivalent to 10,000 lifetimes, describing the various wonders of the universe and displaying his comprehension of Tao. This was definitely the battle prowess of a 5th tier. As the might flowed, Ling Han didn't even need to face it head-on to know that he was definitely not a match for it. It couldn't be helped. The 2 of them were 2 whole cultivation levels apart, and Xin Qihu was the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In a battle of the same cultivation level, even if his strength was inferior to Ling Han's, he wouldn't be much weaker. How could Ling Han possibly be a match for him? Without any hesitation, Ling Han immediately drew out his broken saber. Hong! A murderous aura surged out, striking towards Xin Qihu. This exceeded Xin Qihu's expectations, and he was instantly struck by the murderous aura. Because this was not a strike of force, its speed was much faster, and he was caught off guard. This murderous aura was too terrifying. It was formed from the endless slaughter of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and had definitely drunk a large amount of 6th-tier blood. Even a peerless prodigy like Xin Qihu could not help but grunt, and the space between his brows immediately split open, causing a stream of blood to flow out. Ling Han sighed. If he was currently in the 3rd tier, then he would still be qualified to fight with Xin Qihu. Even if he was no match for Xin Qihu, it shouldn't be difficult for him to escape. However, if he was in the 2nd tier, that wouldn't do. If he went up to fight, he would definitely be instantly killed. He turned around and left. Ling Han. Xin Qihu's furious roar came from behind. He had already recovered and was chasing after Ling Han. As expected of an absolute elite of 4th tier, his speed was too high, and even though he was affected by the murderous aura of the broken saber, the effect only lasted an instant. Xin Qihu, I'll spare your life this time. When I cultivate to the 4th tier, watch how I fight a tiger. Ling Han laughed, and the broken saber struck out again. Shoo! Another saber strike was sent out, and the saber light turned into one 30,000 meters long. Xin Qihu launched a furious punch. Pong! The saber chi instantly crumbled. However, he let out another muffled groan as a bloody wound appeared on his fist. It turned out that this slash not only had the power of the broken saber itself, but it also had an additional murderous aura. Thus, although Xin Qihu had dissolved the saber chi with one punch, his hand was still injured by the saber chi. He was filled with hatred. Ever since he had started cultivating, how many times had he been injured? What more when he was injured by an ant whose cultivation level was inferior to his own? His gaze was cold, and his face was filled with killing intent. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.